Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Woodlands Community Centre. I'm just going to go over a few quick housekeeping rules before we begin this evening. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, please leave the building through the fire exits and meet outside at the fire assembly point. Councillors will be using tablet devices to access the agenda for the meeting, or their phones. So if you see people looking up things, it's often because they're not ignoring what they're hearing, they're double-checking facts. We always welcome people to come and speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting and it's not a public meeting. Members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. When the light is amber, there is 1 minute remaining. If it's 30 seconds, I'll apologise and you'll get another 30 seconds. People wishing to speak on an agenda item are able to do so before the debate starts. But once the debate starts, unfortunately, it's not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be inclusive as possible, but we will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruptions, we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people or to continue in private, neither of which we would take lightly or wish to do. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting, you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented to you at this meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and the public, and you are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined any application. This meeting will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel. If any member of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of staff who can bear with, just in case. If you're planning on filming or recording, absolutely fine. You're absolutely legally allowed to do that. And I improve and encourage that participation. But if anybody doesn't wish to be filmed, please let our officers know. I reserve the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped, and more information is available on the Council's website. So, after all that, moving swiftly on to agenda item 1. We have no apologies. We haven't got anything actually to talk about yet. Agenda item 2 is public participation, but we have nobody registered. Everybody registered is to speak on specific items. And with that in mind, I would like to ask members if they would be happy for me to move to receive item 7 immediately after the planning guidelines and item 12 before going back to 9 and 10, and then we will come back to our financial report and our appointment to outside bodies. Is everybody content with that? 11 and 12 you want to leave, not 7. Yes. 11 and 12, go back to 9 and 10. Yeah. So 7. Oh, sorry. That's right. Is everybody content? So we're going to receive item 8 first, after the minutes and the chair's report, which will mean that we get our planning guidelines. Then we will take item 11 and 12. We will go back to 9 and 10, and then we will return to the earlier items of the 6 and 7, which is the financial management and the outside bodies, to enable our participants to leave if they so wish. Okay, our members agree. Excellent, marvellous. Okay, so item 3, declarations of interest. Any interest to declare? Thank you, Councillor Couldrey. Any other declarations? No? Okay, members are of course welcome to raise any declarations if it becomes...
Just that
Councillor Caws.
Just that I'm a volunteer at Stoke Park Farm.
Thank you, Councillor Caws. If any other member becomes aware, please just indicate. That's absolutely fine. Okay, moving on to item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Now, I am aware that we have quite a lot of matters arising from the previous minutes. So first, can I ask for a proposer? Councillor Tidridge, and seconded by Cllr Broomfield, who raised his hand ably. But before we accept them as a true record, can we just go quickly through the matters arising before we vote? Okay. So, under Councillor Tidridge.
Yeah, I note point 158. We asked formally for clarification as to why certain decisions were to be taken by the Joint Area Committee as opposed to the local area committee. I was wondering whether or not any response had been received as yet about that.
Thank you. I'll ask our local area manager.
Thank you, Chair. So the response that I can provide is the Council's constitution states that the Joint Area Committee will determine planning applications that the Service Director of Planning and Environment, in consultation with the Leader of the Council, or by email request of a majority of councillors, considers to be of borough-wide significance. In Appendix E of the Constitution, there are criteria set out, those being development constituting a substantial departure from any approved statutory or non-statutory plan where the local area committee wishes to take a decision contrary to the recommendation of the Planning and Environment Service Director or Planning Manager, or development which has a borough-wide significance or impact or is likely to cause wide public interest beyond the boundary of the borough where the local area committee wishes to take a decision contrary to the recommendation of the Service Director. Or that the development is referred by email request of a majority of councillors. Now, borough-wide significance isn't defined within the Constitution. It would be for the Planning and Environment Service Director in consultation with the Leader of the Council or email request by the majority of councillors to decide whether a development would be considered of borough-wide significance. The majority of major developments will have some impact beyond the administrative boundary within which they are located, but this is within the realms of normal planning considerations undertaken by the local area committee. However, if a development has a far-reaching impact, such as the airport through the impact of noise, or development that provides infrastructure essential for the mitigation of development both within the LAC area and adjoining LAC areas, this could be deemed of borough-wide significance. There are other elements to the motion questions that were raised at that point. Would you like me to carry on and respond to those? Yeah. The LAC continue to have delegated authority where a third-party development is being promoted in relation to council-owned borough-wide assets. The Joint Area Committee has been set out only to determine planning applications and will not have any responsibility for assets, which was one of the elements that was raised.
I don't quite understand that. Could you just repeat that sentence again? Sorry, Kitty.
So one of the questions was whether responsibility for assets would be devolved to the Joint Area Committee rather than LACs. And the Joint Area Committee will only determine planning applications. They will not have any responsibility for assets. Okay. I believe that responds to all of the points within that motion.
Thank you, Kitty. I still can't get my head round why the Joint Area Committee is taking the decision on Stoke Park Farm as opposed to this local area committee. It's a parcel of land that falls entirely within the area of Fair Oak, Bishopstoke and Horton Heath. You're saying that they'll be taking decisions on the assets planning application, but will have no responsibility for the asset. I think we still need clarity as to where that asset sits in terms of responsibility of the council. So does this mean the Joint Area Committee can take a decision about it, but then looking after it then falls down to a committee who then appears to have no say in how that land is actually looked after managed or anything like that. I think we just need a bit more clarity there. The other thing I'd just like to point out, which I'm sure you would have spotted, the Joint Area Committee does not exist as yet in its current form on Eastleigh Borough Council's website. The Joint Area Committee on Eastleigh Borough Council's website refers to meetings in 1999 with no future meetings planned. The meeting of the Joint Area Committee, which I believe is scheduled for next week, and I only believe that because it's not on the website, so how would I know, is not been publicised to the public. This is leaving it really, really tight in terms of, you can see from here there are a lot of people interested in what's going on here tonight, and I suspect quite a few people are here because of the SANG. I think it would have been considerate of the council to let the public know with more time before this meeting of the JAC is due. Sorry, I'll stop ranting.
Thank you, Councillor Tidridge. I'll ask Kitty if she wants to come back before I comment.
Thank you. There is a page on the committee pages of the website that refers to the Joint Area Committee. But I understand from what Councillor Parker-Jones has just shown us that it doesn't show on the calendar. So we will look at that, we will rectify that, and the formal reports will be published shortly, so we will ensure it is publicised. Thank you.
I'm actually a little confused now because it's saying that they're not responsible for assets and they're not taking decisions on assets, but the strategic land is an asset. So they're only looking at planning decisions, which are borough-wide significant. So surely that is 1 Horton Heath, because 1 Horton Heath will affect absolutely everything this council does because of the financial implications and its strategic importance for the borough in delivering its housing need. So I am very concerned as to why the only matters being looked at by this committee, who only have one representative from Bishopstoke, Fair Oak and Horton Heath on it, is taking decisions only on matters affecting Bishopstoke, Fair Oak and Horton Heath. Yes, I've got more questions than answers, actually, having heard the response. So I think we will need to reconsider this and come back to what the Joint Area Committee does at a further date at full council. I was going to go through in order because I actually have some other matters arising. One was part 153 under the public participation, where the local area manager promised to feed back on the replanting of Cllr Copse to an individual. And the other matter was to say thank you to Councillor Tidridge and, in fact, the whole of the committee for your response to the biodiversity consultation, because the response was put in. So there was a couple of things I did want to say. Can I just ask the local area manager, were you able to respond to the individual? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I believe a response has been provided. I will have to follow up and make sure that has gone. I was in discussion with the enforcement team around that, so I can confirm after the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate or if I'm even allowed to say this, but we're very limited in what we are permitted to say about Cllr Copse, and I know it's frustrating for members of the public. All I can say is we haven't given up. We are working really, really hard to ensure that enforcement happens, but because it's a legal proceeding, we need to be really careful in what we say so we don't prejudice things. But action is attempting to be taken. I think we are permitted to say that Eastleigh is in consultation with the other party's agent to agree planting, but because we've missed the season, we are still in negotiation. So it's not over. Okay.
Councillor Broomfield.
If the gentleman who came along to our last meeting and raised that question has had a response, and we assume he hasn't signed the Official Secrets Act, could that response not be shared more widely, because he asked questions that pretty well everybody in Fair Oak and Horton Heath are asking?
I absolutely agree. So once our local area manager has had an opportunity to check, I'll ensure that it gets shared amongst all members. Okay? Councillor Marsh.
I think that's already been done because there was a comms that went out which said almost what I've said, that's what we're allowed to say at this stage, but it's not finished. It is still in process. But I think a communication went out and was published on Facebook too. So I think it is in the public domain, but not everyone always sees it. So repeatedly people periodically ask questions. But I'm hoping later this year we'll know more.
Thank you. If there's no other comments on the minutes, can I have a show of hands for acceptance of them? Thank you, members. Right, moving on to item... Oh, no, my item. I'll go back to my item, shall I? Or shall I do my item? Item 5, which is the Chair's announcements. I'm actually not going to say much. I'm just going to say it's... really nice to have Councillor Tidridge and Cllr Broomfield back on the committee. I was also going to mention that there is a meeting of the Joint Area Committee, which is a newly established committee which seems to be looking at matters that cover Bishopstoke, which will be meeting next week on Thursday the 25th at Eastleigh House. It will start at 7 p.m. So that was all I really wanted to raise. So we'll now move swiftly on, and I'll ask Dawn to present the planning guidelines at item 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, just as usual, presenting the planning guidelines on how planning applications need to be determined or considered. First and foremost, must be considered on planning grounds, and I would urge you to do that. So matters around procedure, assets, all those things aren't planning matters, so please focus on those on the relevant applications. You must consider in proposals in line with the development plan, and all the policies are detailed in the reports, or the relevant ones, unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and again they're detailed where relevant. The development plan in this borough is the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan, the adopted plan 2016 to 2036, and also, where relevant, the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. So they combine to form the development plan. And as you've noted, applications of borough-wide significance are now being determined by a joint area committee, with the recommendation first being considered by the local area committee. So relevant considerations, again, all detailed in your reports. They may also include supplementary planning documents where relevant, government policy, including the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, updated last December, soon to be updated again, and national policy statements, again, where relevant. The NPPF is a material consideration of significant weight and may take precedence over the development plan where policies are silent or don't accord with it. So some key points around that on the screen. That presumption in favour of sustainable development is important, and the drive to promote growth and the economy, but also to prevent or mitigate impacts. Sustainability very much at the centre of it. Other material considerations may, again, are detailed, but may include things like the planning history, previous planning applications, appeal decisions, site-specific matters obviously are very relevant, consultancy and third-party comments where relevant, and precedent, again, where relevant. But there are non-planning issues that we do put up, just to remind you that things like, devaluation of property or private views, covenants, matters covered by other legislation, civil matters are not planning matters, which, and even if raised, will not be given weight. That's a summary, really, of planning guidelines. So I'm sure you're all familiar with them, yeah, well, that's for now.
Thank you very much. So now we're moving on to item 11, which is the planning application for St Martin's on Church Road, Bishopstoke, Eastleigh, SO56BH, planning application F2496839. I will start by asking Claire to present the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. The next application is for the construction of 2 dwellings with double garages to replace the existing bungalow at St Martin's Church. The application includes a new access off Spring Lane for the rear property. The site is shown in red on the location plans and is accessed off St Martin's Close, which is a small private lane leading to Church Road. The site itself comprises a large grass plot with a detached bungalow and garage located towards the southeastern corner. While the site is still relatively flat, there's a gentle incline upwards along St Martin's Close to the application site and then a steep drop at the back down to Spring Lane. The site is located within the urban edge where the principle of development is acceptable. It's also within an existing residential area where the properties are of varying sizes and designs. This includes various Grade 2 listed buildings at the old Rectory Cottage and to the south, and 117 to 118 Spring Road to the north. The site is located within Bishopstoke Conservation Area where new developments are expected to preserve and enhance the historical character of the area. The site was originally part of a walled kitchen garden which served the Longmead House estate. Part of the historic brick wall still exists around the plot. The best preserved section is marked in orange on the plan. Its condition deteriorates to the eastern end of the plot and parts have collapsed completely. There are also a number of trees within the site and surrounding residential gardens, most notably towards the site's southeastern boundary with Spring Lane. There is one mature yew tree in the centre of the site, which is protected by a tree preservation order, and a handful of protected trees in the garden of Friar Main to the south. Next, I've included some photos to show the site in a bit more detail. The map at the top shows the photos, where the photos have been taken from. The bottom 3 photos show the approach to the site along St Martin's Close. The photo on the left shows the narrow site entrance, which is enclosed by a building on one side and a high hedge on the other. These features restrict visibility onto Church Road. The middle photo shows the access lane, which serves the application site and the bungalow next door. The photo on the right is at the far end of St Martin's Close, with a wall marking the site entrance, and you can make out some vehicles in the back which are within the site. The photo at the top shows the rear site boundary as viewed from Spring Lane, and here you can see the change in the levels and some of the trees and vegetation along the bank. These 3 photos show the existing site. The photo on the top right corner shows the bungalow, and the 2 bottom photos are taken from the centre of the site looking westwards. Photo 3 shows the historical wall, and photos 1 and 2 show a section of the wall which has been rebuilt along the southern boundary. The photos are shown the current condition of the site, which will be tidied up to make way for the development. The final set of photos show the existing bungalow in more detail, which is a long, narrow structure. The bungalow is in a very poor state of repair, with the most damage visible along the southern side, and this is shown in photo 4. So next we move on to the proposed development. At the top of the slide is the elevational drawings facing northeast towards the Spring Lane Gardens. The elevations show the design and scale of the proposed houses, and the faint red dotted line is the outline of the existing bungalow. The plan below is the proposed site plan. The proposal is for 2 detached houses, one at the front of the site using the existing access from Church Road, and the second at the rear of the site with the new access off Spring Lane. Each house has a new double garage in a courtyard at the front of the dwelling and a generous rear garden. A hedge and trees have been planted between the plots, and the protected yew tree will be in the garden of house 2. The proposal will retain the existing historical wall, and it will be restored so it extends further along the northeastern boundary. Both of the new houses comply with the residential amenity guidance in terms of separation distances of first floor windows to existing dwellings, and only the top floor of the dwellings will be visible over the boundary wall. The The northeast elevation of the dwelling have high-level windows to reduce overlooking into the neighbouring gardens, and there are no first-floor windows on the side facing 10 Church Road. The house has also been positioned in the northeastern corner of the site, so it's the furthest away from the bungalow at Friarmere. The two houses represent a low-density scheme, and their proportions and plot sizes do reflect the adjoining development within the conservation area. The application site is completely surrounded by houses, and so there's limited visibility of the new properties, apart from glimpses of House 2 up the drive from the new Spring Lane access. The houses have been designed to incorporate a range of sustainability measures, including solar panels set into the south-facing roof slope, rainwater harvesting and green roofs to increase biodiversity. And as you can see, the green colour on the plan of houses 1 and 2 are the new green roofs, and they'll be on the single-storey elements. At this point, I thought it was useful to include a slide to show the proposed Spring Lane access. The plan shows the existing trees to be retained in light green, and the bluey green colour shows the new tree planting. Photos 1 and 2 show the existing bank and proposed access, and photos 3 and 4 show the existing proposed view from Spring Lane. Photos 2 shows details of the new vehicular access, which would extend right into the site and that reduces its slope. The edge of the new banks will be finished in wood cladding and will be planted with evergreen plants. An example of a planting is shown is image 5. Once established, the planting should blend in with the other trees and vegetation along Spring Lane. In total, 12 trees are being removed from the site, both at the rear of the site to create the new access and within the site itself to make way for the new houses. 6 of these trees are unclassified, which is the very lowest quality. The other 6 are Class C, which is still low quality, and these will be replaced by 6 new trees within the application site. There'll be 3 along Spring Lane, which is this one, and this one, and another 3 further back between the 2 properties. No objection has been raised by the tree officer, and he's comfortable that the access works and new drilling can be completed without harm to important trees, subject to the final details being approved by condition. You might also be able to make out the purple line at the front of the site, which is a visibility display, and that's shown here. The visibility display conforms to standard for cars leaving the site turning right onto Spring Lane. The visibility display for cars turning left onto Spring Lane is slightly below standard, as the display has been taken to the centre of the carriageway rather than the edge. If the display was enlarged, then this would result in more significant tree loss. The Highway Authority has accepted the reduced visibility display, as cars turning left do not need to cross the flow of traffic, and it's their view that vehicles will be going slower at this point coming up to the bend in the road. It's also noted that the access itself will serve one property, so is likely to result in only a few extra vehicle movements per day. This slide shows the detailed layout with the ground floor and the first floor plans shown in blue. As you can see, the houses are of a contemporary design, with the ground floor using darker brick to complement the existing historical walls, and this has been extended into the site to create courtyards. The first floor is clad in light timber. The majority of the accommodation at ground floor level will be mostly hidden behind the boundary wall. The ground floor comprises the main living and dining areas, with utility room, bathroom and extra bedroom on the western side of the property, and there are routes through the building connecting it with the various outside areas which have been designed to reflect the original kitchen garden. The first floor is a rectangular shape and comprises 3 bedrooms, a study and bathrooms. The bottom images are artist impressions of House 1 moving around the site, starting with the entrance from St Martin's Close. In photo 1, you can see the darker building at the back, which is the new double garage, and the proposed wall in the distance. Image 2 shows a close-up of the front of the house with its new parking courtyard, which is fully enclosed by a new dark brick wall. And image 3 shows the southern elevation of the house taken from the garden. Here you can see the ground floor of the house, which has been designed around a central courtyard. In image 3, you can just make out the solar panels, which are set into the timber roof, and the green roofs will be positioned on the flat roof single-storey sections. House 2 follows the contemporary design and materials of House 1 and is centrally positioned within the plot. The property is slightly smaller than House 1 and is L-shaped, with a parking area to the front and garden to the rear. The property has its main accommodation again on the ground floor. The first floor is a smaller rectangular shape with 3 bedrooms and bathrooms. The bottom images, again, artist impressions of the dwelling. The first is moving into the site from Spring Lane, and on the left is a double garage, and on the right is the main house. And the second image is taken from the garden of plot 2, with the proposed house in the centre and double garage on the right-hand side. In the background, you can see where the existing boundary wall has been restored and extended. So moving on to the key considerations. The site is within the urban edge where the residential development is acceptable. The proposal is of good quality design which reflects the character of the conservation area, and no objection has been raised by the design review panel or the council's conservation officer. The proposals are considered to provide an appropriate standard of living accommodation for its occupiers, whilst not being considered to have an unacceptable adverse impact on surrounding neighbours and amenities. The local highway authority hasn't raised an objection to the proposal, subject to conditions, and ecology, trees, drainage, contaminated land, sustainability, and the mitigations towards the special protection area are considered to be acceptable and are set out within the report. So, subject to securing contributions towards the council's new forest mitigation strategy, the recommendation is to delegate back to the planning manager in conjunction with the chair and vice chair to grant planning permission, subject to the conditions outlined within the report. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now invite our speakers who have registered. Okay. Do we have Gideon Tudor? Have I mispronounced your name? Gideon. Diane. Yes, please, if you would like to present, that would be really good.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes. There is a traffic light system, but when it goes orange, I'll let you know, and that should mean you've got a minute remaining. All right.
Okay. Right, thank you. Okay, so the 3 points I want to raise here are that, first of all, I don't think that the modern character of the development blends in very well with the historical character of the conservation area in Bishopstoke. The second point is that the northern boundary wall or what remains of the northern boundary wall is a historical wall that would be nice to preserve, and as you noted, the site does gently slope upwards towards this wall, and levelling the site in order to, or reducing the ground level in order to level the site could put this part of the wall in jeopardy, especially as it's already leaning towards the site at the moment, so it might put it in further danger of collapse. I'd like to see it preserved if possible. And my third point is that I think that it's important to preserve biodiversity and trees in this area. I think the recommendation stated that council policy is that all new developments should have a net biodiversity gain. I'm not sure that's actually proven to be the case here, especially when several species are going to be disrupted, including some protected species such as badgers, and also the number of trees that are being proposed to be planted by this scheme doesn't seem sufficient to offset the ones that are going to be removed by the scheme. That's referring to the council supplementary planning document on trees, so both the number and actually the location of the trees that are proposed by the scheme, because at least one of them is too close to the new buildings to actually be counted as a valid tree that is replacing one that's been removed. So those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now have also speaking in opposition John and Rosina Watkins. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Don't rush and don't panic.
Okay,
And
no problem.
when it goes orange, I will let you know, and you should have a minute remaining. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything? Okay. So we live in Friar Main, which was previously referenced. We're on the southern boundary of the property. Our northern boundary is the majority of the southern boundary of the proposal site. So we acknowledge that the site needs improvement because it's been very poorly maintained, and particularly with reference to the walls, which the previous speaker mentioned. 2 parts of the southern boundary wall, historic heritage wall, fallen, one of which fell on our property and was replaced with wooden fencing, shorter, lower wooden fencing. So we're very concerned that this development won't take into account not just the historical nature of the conservation area, but also the health and safety aspects as well. We've got some sort of significant concerns about the ability of the... Could I point at the screen, please? Would that be okay?
House number 1. And the roof on house, the roof on house 1 is not going to look historic to us in any way, because it's going to have solar panels on it, which will be above these very large, able to walk through glass windows that will look out onto our property, and the roof above it will be covered in solar panels. And so all of that will be visible to us, because the trees to the right of our property, Friar Main, the lower building, are ash trees. They're very tall. They have very tall, very large trunks, and the replacement fence that's between us isn't very high. We will be able to see onto that house completely, and they will be raised, be able to step out onto their balcony that has a grass lawn in front of it, and they will be able to potentially party up there, and they will be able to look down onto our bungalow, which is single story.
Could I just, I know we've got red light, very quickly just say, we're concerned about flooding because our property is below the level of these. There's a single, very small property, and there's going to be increased concrete, 2 properties, and house 2 doesn't have drainage, and we are concerned about the ecology and the traffic, which has been mentioned by the
ecology, yeah, and sharing the driveway as well, where we currently already share with a business owner who has things going up and down there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time.
Okay, I will now open it up for councillors to ask questions. Oh, do you want to respond?
If you don't mind.
Yeah, or you can do it with the rest of the questions. Which would you prefer? I'll let you go first.
It's easy to respond to things.
Okay, I will come back. I have noted your desire to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to come back on a couple of the points raised. Yes, the design is slightly different from what has gone on around there, but each of the properties around there are slightly different in themselves, and the site itself is fairly insulated. You've just got the access here, a little glimpse up. So as planners, we felt maybe it was a site that could take a slightly different development, and the development itself does take cues from the historic history. The northern boundary wall, yes, they are aiming to preserve that. The house itself is about 2 metres in, so it is away from the boundary itself. We could have, if you'd like, an extra condition looking for protection measures to come in if that was something that members were particularly keen to do. In terms of biodiversity, they are putting some biodiversity measures in there. Not only are the green roofs, they are putting bat and bird boxes in as well. The tree planting, yes, there are some trees that are coming out, but for all of the class C trees, they are replacing those. And although we'd like additional trees on the site, there's a limit to how many the site can accommodate. Seeing what else there were. Oh yes, These sections here are actually green roofs, so you can't actually step out onto them. But again, we could have a condition ensuring that to protect the neighbours' amenity. Yes, there's an additional double garage in here. Yes, with any development within an urban area surrounded by residential properties, there is inevitably going to be an impact on neighbours. And as planners, we look at the extent of that impact. The distance between the windows here, there are no windows in the property here, so the nearest windows are over here, 26 metres. Our guidance looks, if there were first floor windows, 22 metres, so it is over what our guidance looks at. So as planners, it's something we consider reasonable. The flooding, we have got a condition looking for sustainable drainage, so that should help with the flooding issue. And the site itself shouldn't increase the amount of access over the shared driveway because you're replacing one bungalow with one house using this, so it shouldn't, from a planning point of view, have an additional impact on the driveway.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I will open it up for councillors' questions. This is the questions, not the debating element. Councillor Tidridge, Cllr Caws, and then Councillor Marsh. Councillor Tidridge.
Thank you. I don't suppose, Claire, you've got anything showing the kind of topography of the site, because I think the slope is something that makes it quite distinctive. And I think that would help us to understand how those houses kind of sit in the surrounding area.
A slide that shows that, unfortunately.
No, what I mean is that there's the proposed houses are uphill of Friar Main House, so it would be useful to kind of see how it kind of fits vertically, if you like, as well as...
I see what you're saying. Unfortunately, I don't have a topography plan on hand. The photos show the site itself being relatively flat, but I haven't got a plan that shows it in relation to the other properties.
Councillor Tidridge, did you want to ask anything else?
No, that's it.
Councillor Caws.
So my question is about the recommendation. I wanted to know why you state that it's recommended to be permitted subject to securing contributions towards the New Forest mitigation strategy. Can you explain that?
The site itself is within... I'm trying to think what the easiest way to describe it is. It's in the catchment zone for the New Forest. So the Natural England did a survey to show that so far away from the New Forest, people travel to visit quite regularly. So any new properties within that area are expected to contribute to the council's New Forest mitigation scheme. That involves creating green spaces within the borough which they could use instead of, and contribution towards that. It also involves funding towards a ranger for the New Forest. So there are measures in place to try and ease the recreation disturbance on the New Forest.
I understood that the SANG was the mitigation for the New Forest. So how is it a new thing that will every development have this that's in the area, in the borough?
In the catchment area, it covers most of our borough. There's a small section of, I think, Fair Oak that it doesn't catch, but most of the borough it does do. Most of the contribution is going towards the SANG. A small part of it is going towards a ranger for the New Forest.
What do you mean going towards the SANG?
Funding for it. So the contribution received then goes into the pot of money that's put towards the SANG. It's part of the mitigation strategy, which includes the SANG.
Okay. So does that mean that every planning application will, in the whole of Eastleigh Borough, will now have mitigation towards the New Forest, will have contributions towards the New Forest mitigation strategy?
New dwellings, apart from one section of Fair Oak. Yeah, so yes, sorry.
Councillor Marsh.
Sorry, I've got a few. Can I start off with how many objections were there? Because you mentioned there were none from Eastleigh or Ecology and all those people, but how many public objections were there, please?
There were 8 objections from the public.
Next question was about the houses in the area, because I don't know that area particularly well. I know Spring Lane, but I don't know all the surroundings. Are the majority of the dwellings in that area single-storey sort of bungalows, or are there a substantial number of 2-storey buildings?
They're mostly 2 stories. There's a bungalow here, and these ones around here are 2 stories.
Can I just come in there, Councillor Marsh? The properties to the right coming up Spring Lane, so if you were looking at that site where they're coming out and down to the right, most of those properties are bungalows as they go on up, and there are small terrace houses, which is slightly different from very big on Spring Lane, which one of these new ones will be on. And that was a bungalow previously, so the height difference, I think we definitely need to have a broader discussion about. Hope that helps.
Sorry, that's precisely what I was getting to. I noticed the comment about it not being in character with what's there, not knowing what is in character. I wanted to query that section of it. I was slightly concerned because when I looked at the drawings, I thought, yep, this doesn't look too bad because it looks like they're dormer high-level windows. But then as soon as you showed us the photographs of what it's going to look like, I thought, actually, those are giant windows on the side of the building on the first floor. That doesn't look like dormer-like windows like in the drawings. And it might have been my misunderstanding from it, but initially I thought, okay, they're going to be high-level windows that aren't going to interfere in people's privacy. And I also wanted to check with Dawn because I can't remember. I know we can't say no on the basis of view, but what about people's privacy being lost? Is that a thing that can be looked at from a planning legal point of view?
Privacy is, yes, a planning consideration, and it's the level of impact. This slide shows the windows along here, and the windows along here facing the gardens in these properties are high level, and you can just see them here and see them here. Most of them are a corridor at the back of the 2 properties. The other side windows are just shown here, and they are larger windows, and these ones are the ones that are facing south this way.
Just want to make sure I got this all right. Right, so the high-level corridor-like windows are going to be facing the double-storey buildings opposite them.
Yep.
But the great big windows on the side of the building are going to be looking over and across the fence at a bungalow.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so the bungalow's privacy will be impacted potentially.
Potentially,
other than being
it's
4
just
metres further away than what we recommend.
Yeah, I think what you need to do is look at the level of the impact. There is 26 metres from the edge of this property here all the way to the bungalow's windows over here. So yes, there will be overlooking, but it's more than the 22 metres which our standards say. So yes, there will be an impact, but as planners, we don't think that's unacceptable. But obviously, members have to form their own opinion on that.
Sorry, final one, I promise. I know the garage isn't a favoured aspect, but with that slate roof, will that slate roof, which will be seen from the bungalow, will that obstruct the view from the new house to the bungalow? As in, will it provide any privacy, or will it not help with the privacy for those people?
It might help a little bit, because obviously they'll be looking down towards the neighbour. I mean, this area in the neighbour's property is their front parking area, so in planning terms it's not considered quite as important as a rear garden where you'd relax in. The garage might obscure views a little bit, but yeah.
Councillor Couldrey.
Some people get things wrong every time, don't they? One thing I didn't pick up is where the problem on the southern boundary is and what's being done about that.
One of the conditions does look at boundary treatment. As far as I'm aware, I think this existing wall is staying and the fencing, I think, is staying here. But again, if that is a big issue, that's something that we could get them to replace with a nice wall along there.
Councillor Broomfield and then Councillor Caws.
Thank you. The rectory obviously is Grade 2 listed, as are a couple of other properties nearby. Is the wall listed?
The wall around this site isn't listed. It's noted in the conservation area as a historical feature. It's not listed, so it doesn't have any protection.
I'll come back to you on that, Councillor Broomfield,
Okay,
because
good.
it used to be listed and it had its status, I believe, removed because it fell into disrepair. So there's a difference between the fact that it actually is and it should have been maintained because it is of historical significance to Bishopstoke, but that's why it's no longer listed. Does that make sense? That's correct, isn't it?
It does make sense. So whose responsibility is it?
Isn't it surely the owner's responsibility?
It depends where the wall, but that goes beyond what we can do under planning.
Yeah, so I believe the owners are that own the wall because it's part of their boundary, as far as I'm aware. Because they put in a previous application for it in the 1980s, if I remember reading that correctly. So.
And we also heard that part of it had collapsed and you had to fix that. Yeah. The other question I have, you did mention it, but I just want to confirm I heard it correctly. The distance from the house to the bungalow, did you say it was 20 metres?
My microphone was off. 26 metres from the windows in the southern part of House 1 to the windows in the bungalow over here.
Councillor Caws and then Councillor Marsh. Councillor Caws.
Just coming back about the wall, would it be possible to clarify ownership of the wall?
It's not, unfortunately, it's not a planning issue, so it's not something that we could usually
Okay,
ask
that
for
was
those
just a
details.
side question.
Yeah.
My other question is, so the new access pathway, it's quite a significant elevation, more than was shown in the photos, I believe. Do you have figures for the elevation, or is the access road going to be slowly rising and going through the current hill?
The access road is going to be slowly rising to go through the hill here, and the bank's going to be slightly reprofiled either side, so it's going to be a gentle rise up. I think it's about 1 in 6 gradient.
Okay, which brings me to my second point about, Mr. Taylor's point actually about the badgers, because everyone who lives in Bishopstoke, and you know, I walk past there almost daily, knows that there's a badger set there, and I know that it was in the report. It hasn't been mentioned, apart from by Mr. Taylor, but that, you know, I mean, the solution was to close off the holes, before excavating, which I guess is, you know, not great for the badgers. But my question is, do they have they applied to Natural England for a badger development licence, the A24 licence?
Again, because it's not a planning issue, I don't know the answer to that question. If they require the licence, they will have to do it, and they will need Natural England's approval. But it's outside of the planning process.
Councillor Tidridge.
Sorry, it's a quick one. Apologies if this is in the report and I haven't spotted. Have PD rights, permitted development rights, been addressed as part of the recommendation?
No, they haven't, but that's something that can certainly be added as a condition.
Thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Sorry, I'm going back to the windows conversation. So the windows, 26 metres from window to window. The first story, do we know in the bungalow what windows we're looking into? Because it's very different if you're looking into a kitchen window or bathroom window or bedroom window. I know you said it's parking in the front. Do we know what the nature is of those windows?
No, I don't have that information. Yes, you're right, it is different depending on the windows themselves and the rooms themselves. But the 22-metre rule is from primary windows, so you'd say it from a main living area to a main living area, and the fact that it's over there in planning terms should be acceptable.
Any other questions? I have one question about whether we can remove a word from one of the statements, because it says, in the unlikely event that a bat is found. That needs to most certainly just state, in the event that a bat is found, because they are a protected species. So I don't like the use of that. I'm also very concerned about the badgers, and has any work been done or provided about their roots and their habitat around that bank and into that property?
We did consult our biodiversity officer, and it's not something that she raised, so I'm not aware if there's any additional work that's been carried out in relation to that.
Okay, thank you. I know we will all be keen to get into debate on this, so I do, however, need to have a proposer and a seconder. The purpose of a proposer and a seconder is just to enable the debate to take part. It does not refer to how they may or may not vote. So Councillor Broomfield proposes and Councillor Tidridge seconds. Thank you very much. Any debate? Councillor Tidridge.
Thank you. I don't have, I have quite mixed feelings about this development. I would certainly disagree that traffic slows down on that corner of Spring Lane. I think anybody who's walked it or knows it in Bishopstoke knows that, weirdly, it tends to be quite the opposite. People tend to speed up there. I think maybe because it looks less residential, perhaps that's one of the reasons for it, but it doesn't tend to be an area where cars naturally slow down. It tends to be the reverse. The second thing I'd like to point out is that having a vehicular access is obviously very important and that's safe. However, we would want to be encouraging the people moving into these properties to be walking and cycling and making sure that they can leave their properties safely without being mown down on the road would also be something that I'd want to see considered as part of the driveway treatment to ensure that somebody walking out or accessing the property on foot or on a bike is safe. And that should be, if anything, more important than the safety of somebody accessing it by a vehicle. I think going back to the representation from the neighbours, I think one of the things that does strike me is that it's quite a big plot, but in some ways it's quite tight in terms of proximity to other houses. And certainly the slope, that's why I was asking about the topography, because you've got that slope there, you've got that risk of being overlooked, particularly with these being not bungalows. They do have the upper floor. I think looking at the area flat roof, which Claire, I think you pointed out, wasn't designed to be a party balcony, it was designed to be a green roof. Perhaps we should consider conditioning it to remove PD rights to ensure that any further development on the site does not go through on a nod from the planning department. It's something which does have to go through full planning to do that. I think given the sensitivity of the area in terms of this is part of Bishopstoke's very valued conservation area, and say the fact the site is so close to so many other things, I think removing PD rights would certainly be something which would be a sensible approach to prevent further development on that particular site. I'm really pleased to see the trees retained. I'd be very, very keen to see the wall protected and in some way, because that's a key part of the history of the area. It's a very historic part of Bishopstoke. I don't think that the houses that have been proposed to be built, I think it's nice that they have a nod to the other buildings in the area. And I quite like the fact they're not trying to look oldie-worldy, they're looking of their time, but with a reference to that. I think that's been done quite well I don't know much about architecture, I'm afraid, so I can't really elaborate on that, really. But as far as the trees are concerned, it always upsets me when trees are referred to as low quality. I think it's just mean to the tree. It's just every tree is high quality. But I think in terms of the big yew tree and some of the more valuable trees on site, it's really important that the development doesn't damage them, that the process of building, that the process of digging is done sensitively so that those trees are not damaged as part of that. And certainly I'd like to see that, again, within the conditions which are imposed on the application to ensure that they are protected going forwards. In terms of wildlife, there's always a surprising amount of wildlife in corners of Bishopstoke. It's one of the reasons why those of us who live there love living there so much, is because we've got that connection to nature in surprising places. And certainly ensuring that if there are badgers on site, if there are bats on site, that they are treated appropriately, and also that birds and other aspects of wildlife are treated properly. That's very much within keeping for Bishopstoke. I was looking at the parish council's response. They're concerned about the wall. They're concerned about it fitting in. I'm very pleased, to be honest, to see that there's a green roof. I'm very pleased to see that there's solar. They're both aspects which I think are important for buildings going forwards. And so, like I said, I don't have a problem with it looking modern, not looking like a pastiche of an older building, but with nods to it. So I don't have a problem from that perspective. My biggest concern is making sure that it doesn't lead to further inappropriate development, and that although everything's been done very sensitive, or trying to be happening very sensitively here, that doesn't get ignored in the future or set a precedent for doing things worse in the future. But my biggest concern about it is Spring Lane and that access, not only for cars, but for somebody walking, somebody cycling. How can they safely access the local bus stops, the local shops, the local area? That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Tidridge. Any other members? Councillor Marsh.
I completely agree with what Councillor Tidridge said, and I think you've raised some incredibly valid points. I think the terraces are a real concern, and I understand why neighbours were concerned about that. And I think future-proofing it, if this development is approved, future-proofing it, because those terraces certainly won't be within the 26 metres. Or within the 20. How many were we allowed? 22? So it's 22 we're allowed and they're 26 metres away. So they'll be closer than that. So I think there has to be a condition that future-proofs, that A, those can only be used as living roofs, that nobody can set foot out onto them. They can never be used to access from within the building, and that for no future development is permitted than those. I think there does need to be a second condition on the walls. I think the walls need to be preserved, and that condition needs to be put there. A lot of what we've heard about objections from Parish Council is around the wall preservation, and in the past it sounds like they've got away with the wall being allowed to be neglected and run down and therefore replaced with a fence, which just isn't right. So this is within our means planning-wise, so we should ensure that that is enforced. And I too like the green roofs. I know it's not great looking at them, but I think it's important. We're working towards climate change, sustainability, and I'm pleased to see that developers are putting green roofs in. I must be honest, and I would have been a lot happier if it had been a bungalow with a green roof on top of it, because I think that would have been kinder to the neighbours who they will be overlooking. So that is my concern about it, but I do like the fact that there are green roofs there.
Any other members who wish to? Cllr Caws.
So, yeah, I agree with Councillor Tidridge and Councillor Marsh, but I'm not sure about the trees. I'm just not happy that 6 trees are being removed, because I feel that however many trees you replace, you cannot replace an ancient tree or an older tree with a younger tree. It's a completely different tree. So that I'm not happy with that. You know, I know 12 trees are being removed, but 6 in good condition apparently. The site access really worries me on so many levels. Safety, badger, you know, it's basically removing a long-term badger set, so for nature and safety of people and wildlife. So yeah, I'm not happy on those for those reasons.
Councillor Broomfield.
Thank you. I have to say I share the concerns that Councillors Tidridge and Marsh mentioned. The only thing I would point out is it makes a pleasant change to sit in this committee and see such a small development. The routine in Ferrick or Horton Heath would probably be to get half a dozen houses on each plot. So what we have here are 2 what look like good quality houses built to last, built to a good standard. I take the points about the slope, and I've been looking as best I can on Google Maps and Street View, and there is obviously a slope. However, 26 metres is a pretty good distance between properties. Where I live is probably about 10 metres. So my next door neighbour can see what I'm doing any time they choose. So I think it's one of those things in a modern society we probably have to put up with. I suppose what I'm saying is it could be a damn sight worse, and I think we have to accept that this plot will be developed. And I think if we reject this one, it could well come back with something a lot less acceptable. So I think we probably just have to bite the bullet, accept this one on the basis that actually it's very likely the least worst option that's going to go there.
Thank you. Councillor Couldrey.
Thank you. I listened to what my fellow councillors said, and frankly, I agree with everybody what everything said. It is a plot that has to be developed. It makes sense. It's, as far as I can see, as good a development as we're going to get on there. There are difficulties, but I think I think we just got to swallow it and accept that that's probably the least worst that we're going to get and deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Couldrey. Yeah, my concerns are about, I am concerned about the new junction onto Spring Lane. There is no pedestrian access on that left-hand side. It is fast, and people come down that hill very fast. So if you're a pedestrian crossing out of there, you will know about it, that the traffic is faster. I'm very concerned about the removal of the trees. I think we should be most certainly be securing, if we cannot get all those trees back on that site, then we should be demanding that trees are planted elsewhere within our area. That's not ideal, but it would be a good mitigation. So I don't understand why we haven't said, okay, if you can't put them all on site, you must pay for an additional 6 trees which are missing, and they should be planted somewhere else in the area and close by. I'm a bit concerned about this. It's not ideal, the turning out left as well, because the slope is going to make it difficult. You're going to be turning left and going up a hill. So you're going to have to turn out and go up if you're in a vehicle or on a cycle. It's not a gentle slope there. That's quite a steep bit. So when they exit, if things are coming up faster, because people tend to speed up as soon as they get to the bottom of Portal Road and come up past, I think that could be dangerous. I am very concerned about people being overlit. I just think it's just awful. But I also understand that this is quite a large site and it could end up potentially with even more properties on it. Which, you know, that's always the fine balancing act, isn't it? So we would definitely need to seek conditions about further development, the permitted development and the retention of the wall. So that's my views at the moment. Does anybody want to come back? Councillor Marsh?
Well, I want to know if we can ask officers a question, because the things you've raised have led me to want to ask two questions. One, are we permitted to have a condition that trees are planted elsewhere, or we're not allowed to do that? So even though we want to, we can't say, because it's a great idea.
Again, we come back to you, whatever you decide has to be compliant with the development plan. There is no development plan policy that says do that. It would also need to be encompassed in the planning obligations SPD. So it's something that you can push for when the planning obligations SPD gets revised, but there must be, it has to be publicised, it has to be consulted on. You can't just sort of make up that, you can ask for money for things as ad hoc. It has to go through an adopted, process so that it's fair and open. So it is something for the future, possibly, because if this comes up, but not for today.
So can I ask that we get that looked at whenever we need to, because I won't know when we need to do that. So can we do that, Kitty, please, is the first thing that I'd ask. So we definitely can't say, out the goodness of your heart, could you please plant 6 trees somewhere else, and we'd like to see you do that. That's a no, I'm guessing. And then the second question was, because I understand what you're saying about concerns about coming onto the road and the width of it. Are we able to, within it, have a condition about the widening of the drive and almost setting back to create almost a safe haven as they come out, rather than directly onto the road? So could the bank be, and I don't know from the topography whether you can cut back the bank slightly so that it's able to access or not?
The bank is incredibly steep, and I'd be really reluctant to have it any bigger, because I don't even know if it would be their land at that point. And also, that is such a historic, I don't think, it's hard to look at a lane and say that's really historic, but that lane really is. There's a crossing that goes across it when you used to cross from the gardeners' cottages across the spring. Literally, it's called Spring Lane. There's still a bit of the bridge remaining, so when it was part of the Longmead estate. And I can wax lyrical about this, as you know, as I'm on the Historical Society. But it's also an important shape. It's iconic. It's what Spring Lane is, with that massive bank. So it's being fundamentally changed, and the visual aspect is being fundamentally changed. And I would definitely not want to see any more of that bank removed, because of the impact it will have on our nature and our trees and our wildlife. Yeah, that's my observation of it. It will fundamentally change the look of Spring Lane.
Can I just say thank you, because it's helpful to understand that, so thank you.
I know, before we get to whether we're voting in favour or against, there's been a number of statements made about additional conditions that would be wanted. And it would be better for us to have those conditions so that when we do vote, we're voting on an entire thing, whether that's for or against. So would members mind if we pause for 2 minutes to get those conditions drafted so we know what we're voting on?
Is that a 2-minute official adjournment?
It's a 2-minute official adjournment. Okay, members, if you're all... Has everybody come back in? Yes. Everybody's back, yes. Okay, members, so we've got the high-level headings, which we will read out, because obviously they'll be formally drafted in consultation with the chair and the vice chair. but just to go over them to ensure we've captured all of the additional conditions that have been requested. Can I ask Cllr to read them out?
Thank you, Chair. The first additional condition would be about the southern wall to make sure that the fence section is replaced. It would include to a certain height, which would suggest about 1.8 metres. The second condition would be that the green roofs have to be retained as green roofs and can't be used by people onto the roofs. The third is protecting the existing historic wall and getting measures to protect that in before starting development. The fourth condition is to remove permitted development rights. And finally, we've got a couple of changes to the note to applicants. The first is to take the unlikely word out of the bat one. And the second additional note to applicant would be about the licensing requirements for badgers.
Councillor Broomfield.
I'm happy with that, except with the wall, I would like the word sympathetically involved in replacing the fence, or appropriately, or whatever word you want to use.
Any other comments on the additional conditions? Of course, they will be written up in full and have to be approved outside of committee. Okay, so with all those points, the Councillor Broomfield.
Sorry, so we vote on the amended, but then we delegate you to finalise the wording with Cllr and Dawn, yes?
That would be correct. So the recommendation currently is... Oh, I've got to go back a few pages, sorry. My computer shut. Okay, there is that the development hereby be committed and start no later than 3 years from the date, and then the whole conditions and reasons, and then and we would say that it would be as amended in consultation on the conditions as described in consultation with the chair and the vice chair, with the planning officers, of course. Is that correct? Is that the right way of saying it? Is delegated. Yeah, it is delegated back. Good. I thought it was. Right. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour of the recommendation as amended, please show now. 2, 3, 4. Anybody abstaining? Anybody against? 2. So 4 in favour and 2 against. That means it's been carried. Thank you, members, and thank you for everybody who spoke. If anybody would like to leave now, please do feel free, and I will pause the meeting for a second. But if you would like to stay and hear the rest of it, please let me know. Okay, thank you, members. Now we're going on to item 11, which is the planning... Oh, no, we've just done that. Item 12, which is the planning application for James Mead Farm, Winchester Road, Fair Oak, Eastleigh, SA 57 HD X 24 97156. And I will again ask Cllr to present this application.
Thank you very much, Chair. The application relates to the existing house at James Mead Farm, which was constructed in 1981 to support the beef raising business at the site. This business wasn't profitable, so it was later changed to a horse breeding business. The planning permission is to replace the planning permission placed an agricultural tie on the property, which means that the house must be occupied by an agricultural worker or horse breeder, either working with the farm or employed in the locality. Sorry, my screen's frozen. It's just not showing it up Here is the location plan with the site shown in red. The access to the site is via a long private driveway from Winchester Road opposite the Fox and Hound pub. The site consists of the farmhouse and its residential grounds. To the east of the site is a collection of farm buildings and exercise yard associated with previous horse breeding business. Otherwise, the site is mostly surrounded by countryside. The property itself is a large detached house with 5 bedrooms and covers a floor area of 335 square metres. It's much larger than an average residential worker's dwelling, and if submitted today, the plan would limit a dwelling to 120 square metres. I've included some photos of the property which shows the condition of the house and outdoor swimming pool located in the rear garden. As you can see, the house is in a poor state of repair and requires a large amount of money to be spent on it to bring it up to a livable standard. In planning terms, the site is within an area of countryside where there is a presumption against new residential development unless they are for agricultural workers. Policy DM27 covers agricultural dwellings. It also sets out the 3 conditions for removing an existing agricultural tie, which the application must be assessed against. The first is that there is no longer a long-term need for a rural workers dwelling in the locality. The second is that reasonable efforts have been made to sell or lease the property with the occupancy restrictions. And the third is the property is not suitable or not needed as a rural affordable dwelling. Now I've just summarised the basic points from the committee report. There was a viability assessment submitted with the application. It stated that the only viable option for the holding was dairy farming, but this would require a very large investment for what is a low return. The property itself was marketed along with the 10 hectares of farmland for 1.95 million for 11 weeks, and it didn't receive any offers. The house was eventually sold for 600,000 without the land. As the agricultural land is in a different ownership to the dwelling, there isn't a reasonable prospect of it being occupied as a single unit in the future. The 5-bedroomed house at 335 square metres is beyond the means of an average agricultural worker, and today would be capped at around 120 metres, so you can see the difference in the sizes. The house also requires a substantial investment to bring it up to a livable standard. Finally, they're likely to be more suitable and affordable open market dwellings for agricultural workers in the locality. In conclusion, it is unlikely that property will be occupied by an agricultural worker in the future, and the removal of the agricultural tie will bring the current rundown house back into a functioning residential use. The recommendation is therefore to permit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now ask our speaker who's registered to speak in objection, David Ash, to present.
Can I say I'm speaking on behalf of ADD?
You're speaking on behalf of Action Against Destructive Development. Thank you very much.
ADD are objecting to this application because it's based on the presumption that James Mead Farm is at 10 acres cannot be viable as an equestrian business. The Ian Judd viability report on which the application relies on says this, but with due respect, a report commissioned for this purpose will make the points that the client wants it to make. What Ian Judd does not say is that time and again over the last few years, within a few miles of here, business plans have been accepted by planning committees that demonstrate the viability of equestrian businesses with a typical size of 5 hectares or less. The viability report is therefore partial and misleading, and I suggest you cannot rely on it. The house itself is, I could say, a ruin. It's beyond economic repair. It's almost certain that it will need rebuilding in order to reach modern building reg standards. It would be quite possible for it to be rebuilt to a more modest size appropriate to an agricultural tie, if required. This option has not been explored by the farm's owners. The farm was marketed, but was the price a sensible one? Just 2 miles away, Little Oakdale is a comparable business, and it's on the market for 1.1 million. It's got a smaller land area, but it's got much better. The land itself is in good condition, and the buildings are also in good condition, whereas the buildings at James Mead require substantial capital investment to make them usable. They've been left to run to ruin, and the farm is basically just worth what the land is worth. By this reckoning, 1.95 million surely represents the hope value for development, not a sensible price for an equestrian business in this condition. This is, on the face of it, an application about a technicality. However, it clearly represents part of a housing development strategy to see James Mead Farm and possibly adjacent farmland put under concrete. Your policy team are in the early stages of revising your plan, but the developers are plainly jumping the gun and preparing for an outline application, trying to give you, in short, a hefty shove. I tried to walk the bridle path this afternoon. It's blocked. The guy laying terram across it said they were running in 1,200 tons of stone to upgrade the track. He said, on instructions from Hampshire County Council. That's a huge amount of stone. The parish council haven't had any notification of this work from Hampshire, I checked, which they would have expected. Draw your own conclusions. This application is based on the false premise that James Mead Farm cannot be viable and it cannot be demonstrated that it has been properly marketed. Accordingly, we'd urge you to reject the application as it stands.
Thank you very much. Can I ask our planner, have you got any points you'd like to raise after that deputation?
There's probably, unfortunately, not a lot we can say. As planners, it's not within our area of expertise, so we've had to rely on a lot of information within the viability assessment. We did try and consult the county land agent, and we have tried to get hold of them, who are experts, but they haven't given us anything back, so we just have to go on what we think is reasonable. When the application is assessed, you've just got to look at policy DM27, and if we were to refuse it, we'd have to produce evidence why it doesn't meet these. And they are the three criteria that would be assessed against.
Have members got any questions? Councillor Marsh.
One question will be a technical thing, which is, can we put any restriction on it if we break the tie that there's no further development permitted on it? And I have a horrible feeling we've had this before and the answer is no. Can you comment on that one first?
We would have to go back to the original permission. It's unlikely that there would be any conditions on there. It was 1980-ish, so I think it's very unlikely there would be any restrictions on there. So no, we wouldn't as part of this one.
Okay, so in theory, that means that we would potentially be opening the floodgates to an entire new development there. Although it's two separate owners now, it potentially could open it up for development.
For the property itself, we'd look at the original permission, so they wouldn't be able to put, there wouldn't be any restrictions on things like outbuildings. If it needs permission, if they want to put an extra dwelling in there, then that would need planning permission.
Councillor Caws.
Thank you. My question is, do you know if the remaining land has been sold? The remaining...
As far as I'm aware, it has been sold, but it's no longer part of this application site. So
I understand that.
Yeah.
Did you have a further question, Councillor Caws? No, Councillor Tidridge.
So apologies if this was mentioned before, but is the house currently inhabited?
Not that I'm aware of. This statement says it's not been inhabited for a while.
How long has it not been the dwelling for an agricultural worker?
I'm not sure how long it's not been for an agricultural worker. The statement itself says it hasn't been inhabited, and I think it hasn't been inhabited for 3 or 4 years.
I'm just trying to establish for how long they've been in breach of the condition.
They're not technically in breach at the moment because it's not occupied at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Broomfield.
So, just to recap, this house is sold separate from the land for £600,000. It's falling down, effectively. Allegedly, it's been occupied for 17 years, deteriorating to that state. Sort of hypothetical question, what are they going to do with it? Because if it's too big for use, you're going to have to knock it down and build a new one, which is going to cost money. So I presume it's going to be something pretty chunky they're going to be bringing forward an application for, but obviously we can't vote on that basis, can we?
Only consider the application before us tonight, and that is lifting the agricultural tie. There's no other development related to that at the moment. If they came in for a bigger house on the site, if it needs planning permission, then that's something that members can vote on in the future, but it's not part of this particular application.
So, excuse me again, looking at paragraph 28 of your report, basically if we don't, whatever we do with this, if someone wanted to put an application in to build a housing estate, this application would make no difference.
Correct, yes. Yeah, it's literally just changing the occupancy of the existing dwelling from being occupied by an agriculture or a horticulture or a horse specialist to general market housing. There's no development that's included within the scheme, and any new large-scale development, any new housing that needs permission would have to have a new permission in the future, and we can consider that at that stage.
So effectively, whatever we do tonight has no bearing on what applications may or may not come in the future. That's a completely separate issue. So if we say yes to this or we say no to this, that doesn't stop someone coming in with a plan for 500 houses. Thank you.
Councillor Tidridge and then Councillor Couldrey.
I just check on policy DM27. Is it a question of, in order to remove the condition, all three of those conditions have to be met, or is it a question of one of the three?
I think it's all three. So, but if we were saying that it didn't meet one of those, then if it went to appeal, we'd have to produce evidence as why it doesn't meet that.
Councillor Couldrey.
Yes, two things. Whether it's conjunctive and or disjunctive and is, of course, very difficult. I've litigated that in Court of Appeal, and it's always good fun. But the question I really have is twofold now, because one, you're saying the burden is on us to prove. The applicant has to show, according to this policy, that these three conditions are met. So why is the burden suddenly proved to us? I mean, I am very taken with the point which was ably put by the gentleman over there, that this is, you know, all reports depend on who pay for them. And so their report is no evidence at all, in my view. But, you know, that is as may be. But why is the burden suddenly put on us on this one?
At the moment, we are the assessing organisation, so they put their points to us. We assess it the best we can. We don't have a technical expert in this. It's so specialist, we don't have someone in the borough that can tell us this. So we have to judge it the best way we can. If they decide to appeal it, then it will go to the planning inspector, who's an independent body. So he'll look at the evidence put forward by the applicant. He'd also ask us for what our evidence is to refuse it. And because we're not experts in the field, I think we would struggle with that.
I understand that. The second question relates to the actual planning. If this, whether this is given or not, can the owners of that property simply knock down that house and put up another one?
They would need planning permission for a replacement dwelling.
They would need a planning permission for a replacement dwelling, even a single dwelling. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just seek some clarification? In the report, it said that it was marketed only for beef farming.
I think they were just trying to find an agricultural tenant, so it's marketed to anybody who would
But
fit
the
that.
land has now been sold,
Yes.
so presumably there was a market for the purchase of agricultural land. So if you've purchased agricultural land, what additional agricultural properties do we have in the nearby vicinity that would fulfil that requirement for people who work in agricultural to have affordable property?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't got that information. Obviously, there are properties on the open market, and there will be smaller houses that are more reasonable, that maybe are better for an agricultural worker's salary. But unfortunately, I just don't have that information.
So technically, could we be getting rid of the last agricultural property in this area with absolutely no provision for agricultural workers going forward? Because we don't know. We could potentially be, but yeah. Okay, so that the other question was, if the tie was to be removed, because I presume a lot of agricultural dwellings are produced because of an agricultural need, and it means that they're allowed to be developed in the countryside where they would not normally have necessarily been allowed to produce a house or put a house. Does it change the status of the land it is on from being in the countryside if it stops being for agricultural workers? Does it suddenly become part of this urban edge which people keep talking about, which really, yeah, does it?
No, you go back to the local plan. The local plan has a line around the various settlements, and within those settlements, they're within the urban edge. The local plan then says anything outside of that is within countryside. It doesn't change that status. We always go back to that local plan. So even if you remove the tie, it won't change the status of it being in the countryside.
Would it have an effect on a local plan going forward? Would it suddenly be considered that this is now a residential property and not an agricultural property? And will that affect the future local plan which is currently being developed?
It's very unlikely.
Sorry, they were my questions. We need a Councillor Caws, I didn't see your pen. Councillor.
I have another question just to clarify Councillor Broomfield's point about, so if this remained an agricultural tie, I presume that there couldn't be an application for a housing development on that site, or for more than one house? Or?
There could be, yes. Anybody's entitled to put in a new application, and then we would assess it. We would assess it against the local plan. If it's within the countryside and it's not part of an allocated site, then you start from the presumption it's not acceptable.
Okay, but you would assume that they would be applying for new properties with an agricultural tie? They wouldn't be able to apply.
It would be a future development, so they could apply for whatever they want to.
Okay.
We would be then down to us to assess it to see whether it's appropriate and what the local plan says.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more question as well. The land that's been sold, so the original owner, I think it was James's sister, has sold the land. Can you tell me, because it does affect the decision about this for me, has it been sold to many different people, or is it just one other purchaser?
We did ask the question, and unfortunately the agent didn't know because it's been sold off, it's a different owner and they don't have any contact with them, so we don't know.
Looked at me. Any more questions before we enter debate? Again, I will need a proposer and a second. Councillor Marsh is proposing and Councillor Caws seconded. I think you just pipped Gin to the post. Any debate? Councillor Marsh, then Councillor Caws, and then Councillor Tidridge. I think I got that order. And Councillor Couldrey, if you put your hand up, I missed it. Okay, that's all right, just in case.
He's waiting his turn. He just wants to check what we're saying
Councillor Marsh.
first. I am very concerned about B, which is the reasonable efforts to sell, because I completely agree that 1.95 million for a ruined house, but with 10 hectares of land is a lot of land, but not if it's for agricultural use. You can't do anything. So it's a reasonable price if you can develop it and get your money back. But having sold my house, I know that it was on the market for a lot longer than 11 weeks. And 11 weeks feels to me slightly tokenistic, like it might have been put on there for long enough to prove that some effort is made, but it's at an overly inflated price. So I'm not sure that I believe that this is a reasonable effort. I'm also not sure that there's no long-term need for rural workers' dwellings in the area because, as Councillor Parker-Jones rightly pointed out, the land's being sold for rural purposes, so there must be a need for rural workers to work that land. I'm also concerned about the final one, which is the property is not suitable or needed as a rural affordable dwelling. Well, it might not be suitable in its current state, but we have no evidence to say it's not needed as an affordable dwelling. An affordable might mean it needs to be repaired and it could be rented out at a reasonable rate so that somebody with an agricultural tie could afford it. So actually I have a concern about all 3 points, but mainly point B.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Cllr Caws, you were next.
Yeah, just a quick one about, I agree with Councillor Marsh about the second 2 points. Point A, I feel that there is absolutely, we cannot say that there is no long-term need because, you know, long-term, how can we tell? That's long-term into the future. And also the figures, for the figures that we've seen on the reports that businesses haven't been profitable on that location, it's very subjective and you cannot predict whether a business will be profitable into the future because it depends on who's running the business, what type, I mean, it's not even what type of business. You can have an unsuccessful dairy farm, you can have a successful, I don't know if you can have you can have successful and unsuccessful businesses in the very same industry. So I would not agree that you can say you cannot have a successful business on that site. Thank you.
Councillor Tidridge.
Yeah, they're all right. I think for me, this fails on all 3 of those points. I think it is worth noting that perhaps the wording, particularly at point C, is something that the council might want to look at improving in a future local plan. This idea of the property is not suitable or needed, to me that kind of assumes that it's the perfect house for an agricultural worker, and then all of a sudden it isn't. And I think life's a bit more complicated than that. I think maybe maybe the wording for that policy could do with it being improved. But back to our decision tonight, which is based on policy DM7. Is there a long-term need for rural workers dwelling in the locality? Yes, there's fields around it that have been sold, but there are also other agricultural opportunities for employment within the immediate area. It is a rural area, there are farms, there are equestrian businesses there. Point B, reasonable efforts have been made to sell or lease the property. No, they haven't, and I think it's a very subjective thing. Was it put on at a sensible price for a sensible amount of time? I think doubt's been placed in my mind by the speaker earlier, who indicated that a similar property in the area that had less land but a better house went for a lot less money. That to me feels that that's a strong indication that perhaps the attempt to meet policy B was perhaps a little cynical on the part of the applicants. Thirdly, the property is not suitable or needed as a rural fed. Yeah, I've already covered that one. I think it's also worth noting that we don't actually have a lot of low-cost housing in our area. It's one of the reasons why we've been looking at development in the area, is because there isn't much affordable housing that somebody on a lower salary can access. And therefore taking away a property, yes, at 600,000, it probably is beyond the means of an agricultural worker, but if it's going to be sold to an agricultural worker, then presumably the value would need to come down and the price would need to come down so that an agricultural worker could afford it. Somebody's bought this house for 600,000 on a punt. They've gambled. And I think it's worth recognising we're not talking about somebody who's lived here for a considerable amount of time, whose circumstances have changed. This is somebody who's made a purchase and is wanting to change it.
Councillor Broomfield.
But then, on the other hand, whatever decision we make doesn't alter the ability of someone to come along and want to build an estate on the land behind it. So, taking Councillor Tidridge's point, it is entirely possible that whoever buys the land is also taking a punt and hoping that they sit there for a couple of years. If you've got 600 grand to gamble with, you know, I'm not a gambler. I buy a lottery ticket because I can afford one. But if these people are £600,000 as a lottery ticket, who knows, it might come up. So realistically, I'm a bit conflicted on this one because it's 3 times the size of an agricultural worker's home. It's going to cost a fortune to do it up anyway. So the only option really is to demolish it and build something else, I'm assuming. I don't know. I'm really stuck on this one. I can see both sides of the argument, but I'm not. If the bottom line is that whatever decision we make isn't going to affect whether it becomes a development site, then it makes not that much difference. That's the way I look at it.
Thank you, Councillor Broomfield. Councillor Couldrey, would you?
I don't know whether you know, but it was a thriving business a few years ago. It was basically livery stables. And Mr. Mead died. Well, it fell apart in his later life, and now it's all closed down. And I'm sure that a very good business could be run from that site on those bases. So, but that's not the question for us. The question is whether we're persuaded that those 3 conditions have been met. I'm certainly not persuaded that there's no long-term need for a rural workers' dwelling. So I think there really is need for rural workers' dwelling around here. I'm a bit sceptical about the efforts to sell. On the other hand, the property clearly is not suitable, although it is needed, as a rural affordable dwelling. So anyway, I'm not persuaded. I'm not sure it matters. I think Stephen's, Councillor Broomfield's point is that what's going to happen to that land is going to be for another day. But I'm not persuaded, so I won't be voting for it.
Councillor Marsh. Thank you, Councillor Couldrey. Councillor Marsh.
Can I ask you to go back to the page where it tells us what the agricultural tie is? Because when I read that initially, and I might have mistakenly remembered it, it was equestrian, an agricultural tie for equestrian use, for breeders. Oh, there we go. Planning permission for the retention of house accompanying engaged in horse breeding and agriculture. Therefore, because it specifies horse breeding, so to be equestrian type use, I found it interesting that the marketing was around dairy farming. So because this is an equestrian property, or had been, and is set up as such. So again, for me, it raises concerns, because there certainly are plenty of people looking for stables, horse breeding, liveries, all of that kind of thing, which it sounds like they were on that property. So the use of the land, I think there was an original purpose and intention for it, which is why they were given permission to put it there in the first place. And I think we need to look carefully at this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marsh. I've also got, I share concerns that I do not believe all 3 conditions have been met sufficiently. I also am fully aware that the house is not in a good state. I'm also a little concerned that we haven't got expert advice available to us as members, because there is an expert advice available at Eastleigh, that there is a bigger problem here with the decision-making process. Pardon?
Is it okay to come back? I was just discussing with Dawn whether if we could push this to maybe a higher level and maybe see if we can go independent to get an expert in, if you wanted to defer it and have that and come back to a later meeting, or we could ask them to do more marketing as well. So there's things that we could do to get more evidence if you'd like.
It would be very simple to instruct a firm of agricultural surveyors but it would be at the council's cost, which is obviously not something, but we would get a sensible report.
Just advise, yes, because I think our concern is if you go straight for refusal, which may be what you're considering, then then it's a lot of it's on, you know, what you're thinking, but not actually evidenced, and you know, it would go to appeal. The property's empty. You know, there's nowhere else for it to go. So you then have to provide the evidence, and if you can't provide the evidence, you'll risk of costs award, and it may be better to take a view that you defer it. We try and get more evidence from the applicant, but equally we also try, as Claire has said, to get the county land agent to advise, or you know, it may be cheaper to get independent advice than go to appeal and get costs, as well as having to provide that independent advice at appeal. Because it's so specific, it's not like you're judging amenity or something. It is something that you really do have to back up if you want to take that view. And I think that's the difficulty that we're all in, is that we've had to rely on the information from the applicant, which I absolutely understand that you feel is not sufficient. So I think it would be best to consider deferral to get further information, and so that we've got a more informed recommendation coming back to you on that, however long that takes. Obviously, the applicant can appeal against non-determination. That can be taken out your hands, but it is certainly an option that I think is one that you should consider. Thank you.
Thank you for stepping in, because basically I don't feel that we were qualified so to take this decision with the evidence presented to us. So I personally feel, from everything I've heard, I don't feel we've been equipped with both sides of the argument. I feel we've been equipped with one side of the argument rather than both. So I would be much happier to have it deferred and to have expert advice provided to us so we can make a proper decision personally. Councillor Caws.
Could I also request that if we do that, we have information about the ownership of the surrounding land?
If you read the criteria, that is, you're not considering whether via business case, all those things. We have to go down the line of those three criteria. That's what our policy says, and yeah, we can always ask, or you can do a land registry search or whatever, but that's not going to help inform your decision.
Got Councillor Marsh and then Councillor Tidridge. Councillor Marsh.
Okay, I was going to propose that we take the advice we're being given, but I particularly would like to have more evidence, so I'd like us to defer it personally, but I'd particularly like to have more evidence around B. So what reasonable steps have they taken to market this at market value? What is the valuation of the property? Have they gone to lengths? Have they looked at, because it's the option of rental as well as sale, and I think we need proper advice about it, so I think that was sound advice from our officers.
Councillor Tidridge.
Yeah, just really responding to Dawn's very good explanation. Thank you for that. I also think that I can't vote for this in an evidence-based way. And so for that reason, I would very much prefer to defer, because equally you're saying we haven't necessarily got the evidence to say no, but equally I really don't feel we've got the evidence to say yes.
Can I have a proposer to recommend deferral whilst this committee receives additional information as discussed. Councillor Marsh was going absolutely crazy waving, and Councillor Tidridge was second, but everybody, I think, well, that was my whole point, that I don't feel qualified from the information we had. So, we will now be voting. Do I need a proposal in a second? I've got a proposal in a seconder.
You need to vote on that as the substantive recommendation as a deferral, and then we'll need to vote again, proposal and seconder, for the recommendation as amended.
As amended. Okay, so all in favour of the deferral? Any against? No. Now we have to vote on the formal recommendation for deferral, as we've just changed it so that the recommendation is no longer the proposal we had before us. So we're now voting on our new proposal for deferral. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, members. And
sorry, can I ask a quick question about that? Because yes, absolutely want to vote for that, but is it with the condition that we're going to seek independent advice and information about B in the reasonable? Thank you.
yeah, it was as discussed, which is on the 3 points. If anybody would like to leave now, please feel free. And if anybody would like a 5-minute break, thank you. Okay, members, if you're all back, we will continue with the agenda. We're going to move on to item 9, which is the planning application for land at Stoke Park Farm in Bishopstoke, Eastleigh, SO56 DW F2395844. And I'm going to ask Dawn if she will present the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you can see on the screen, that's the application description, which I'll refer to as SANG from now on. I think we'll understand what that is. Alternative natural green space. In this case, it's part of the new forest mitigation strategy for Eastleigh. So an alternative destination for residents who might otherwise go to the new forest and in doing so cause recreational disturbance, particularly for ground nesting birds in the New Forest. So the Natural England, as Claire explained, actually have set a zone of influence, which is 13.8 kilometres across the Solent, and taking the view that people who live in that zone will visit frequently the New Forest, and therefore their preferences for those trips to be diverted elsewhere to avoid those impacts or mitigate those impacts. So hence this application at Stoke Park Farm, so land currently not in agriculture use but previously was former grazing fields. The site is edged red on the screen. It has an access along Cllr Drive from Stoke Common Road, and the application site now includes the cemetery extension car park. Sorry, I'm going to try and get the pointer up here. Is that working? Yeah, that's better. Yeah, sorry, laser pointer's better. So cemetery extension car park here, as well as the site for the recreational use, which are the fields in here. North of Stoke Park Woods, just to point out some existing features. So there's a public right-of-way which runs from Stoke Common Road along a diverted right-of-way now, along here, then along the access track, and then actually round adjacent to and through Stoke, through the former farm buildings and beyond. But so there's a public right-of-way that is affected, others are joining but not within the site. And also, as I pointed out, this car park here is an existing car park, 26-space car park, underused at present, but originally built as for additional car parking for a cemetery extension. Just an aerial view there. so helpful because you can see the woodland to the south. That includes some ancient woodland. The fields in lighter green here, but also with some woodlands amongst it. Housing here, Cllr Drive to the west, and then the public rights of way lead north, south, and east, west towards Fair Oak. So there's quite a good network of rights of way in this area for longer walks. And then just some other photos of the site. So the top left is a photo of the existing, of the fields as existing, with an existing track that runs through the middle of it. You can see the farm buildings, which are outside the application site, to the top of that picture. And then the bottom photo is of the cemetery car park as existing, and that's fairly typical of its use at the moment. 3 or 4 cars, which are primarily used by people using Stoke Park Woods. There are paths leading from the car park, as you saw on that bridleway, but also through the woodland to the application site. So moving on to the layout plan, it's quite a large site. It's 21 hectares, so therefore quite difficult to show on one plan, but this is it. So you've got the access here, and then just inset is the cemetery car park. But primarily this plan is showing the layout as proposed for the SANG, which is required under Natural England guidance to provide circular walks of a minimum of 2.3 kilometres, as well as it's, ideally, and this does do this, extending into longer walks. So people will have the choice of, how far they choose to walk. So the darker lines here are new paths that will be gravel, and then you saw the photo of the existing path which runs through here. That would remain with known edges. So there are mown paths as well as gravel paths, so sort of choice of walking surface. You actually also saw from the photo that the site is quite elevated, particularly at this point here. Has very good views, particularly northwards. It's sort of more screened with woodland to the west and south and east, but northwards, looking towards Winchester, are some lovely views, and this proposals take advantage of that. So sort of paths lead there, and there would be a viewing point, as well as potentially public art and seating. So almost where you might choose to go to on your walk. So as well as obviously the circular routes. So other things worth sort of pointing out on this plan is really just the sort of the woodland, just the context of the site really, and also worth pointing out this is only part of the Stoke Park farm site, so it's not the whole site. So just looking at those, I've broken those plans down because it is a large site, just to sort of point out a few things. So this is a northern plan. You probably can't read that, but there are symbols on there that show there's gates going in, and also some of these pink symbols are showing habitat features, so hibernacular log piles, things like that throughout the site, and you can see that more on the southern layout plan. This plan also shows the woodland buffers. So this is one of the plan amendments that we secured on the advice of Natural England and the Forestry Commission, that there should be a buffered area for the existing woodland, which would be scrub planting primarily. That stops public and dog access, going into the existing woodland, and literally provides a buffer for it. We also secured additional path link here into Stoke Park Woods. That's definitely a desire line in. This one was already proposed, so there's 2 obvious points for links into Stoke Park Woods itself. So again, encourage or enable those extended walks as well as the ones within the Sang itself. There's new tree planting proposed in here. I've mentioned the viewpoint and the paths and the ecology interest. So it is worth actually mentioning, because it's in the report, but the biodiversity net gain for this scheme, bearing in mind that this application was submitted before the 10% mandatory requirement became law, so it's just to get it over the line, 1% in our local plan policy. But the biodiversity net gain for this site is 105% for hedgerows and 58% for habitat creation. So that might not be obvious on the plan, but a lot of it's improved grassland, as well as those buffers also provide very good biodiversity net gain. So even though that's not what the application is necessarily for, it's for recreational use, it does also very much deliver on ecology as well, and the two can sit side by side, as you can see. And then just to mention some report updates. So at time of writing, we only had informal final comments from Bishopstoke Parish Council. So obviously we reconsulted on the amended plans, which took out the on-site car park and the issues around conflict of access between, for the residential properties nearby, for the users of the bridleway, versus cars and other users wanting to access a car park within the site itself. So that was taken out with the introduction of the cemetery car park as a solution to that issue. We widely reconsulted. I believe, members, you had a briefing on that as well, so I won't labour that too much. But we hadn't managed to get final formal comments from Bishopstoke Parish Council at the time of writing the reports, but they now have confirmed that they're supportive of the proposal generally, but including use of the cemetery car park, because that is important. The Parish Council are responsible for burials and the cemetery. So, but subject to provisions for the management and maintenance of the Sang and the car park and the access, and that's absolutely, there are conditions recommended for that, and for disabled parking. Again, condition recommended for that, and the requirement, the Sang criteria, so Natural England guidance, is that for Sang of this size, it would need 4 disabled parking spaces. So 4 of the 26 existing car parking spaces would need to be remarked, possibly losing 1 because they need to be wider, for disabled parking. So that's one of the conditions recommended to you. But aligned, yes, absolutely aligned with what the Parish Council is saying, is that it's really critical that there's a management plan, maintenance provisions, which includes funding for any, that we're asking, for example, for a dog waste bin to go in the cemetery car park. Well, that will need emptying and things like that. So that's that update, and also just a really minor one. So yesterday received an amended construction environment management plan, which is for the construction process. So how everything gets managed during that process, standard requirement. But I got an amended one yesterday, so the condition 13, that requires that to be fully implemented has now got a new date in it, so 13th of July, so that's the update. So obviously you've got a detailed report, just some of the key considerations, and I've mentioned the scheme is providing for new forest mitigation. That is, is something that we have to deal with now with any development that's in that 13.8 kilometre zone, and council has a strategy for that, and this is part of the strategy. So it's supported by our all the relevant planning considerations that we need to have in terms of the principle of it. So it meets local plan policy requirements also in sort of more detail in terms of things like ecology, amenity, things like that. I've mentioned the positive ecological and benefits. It also, the site can also provide nutrient mitigations, again, at the same time as providing, nutrient mitigation just takes it out of agricultural use. So that clearly can be delivered at the same time as recreational use, at the same time as biodiversity enhancement. And the woodland buffers are of benefit as well. In terms of other impacts and considerations, then we have looked at them in terms of amenity. I think particularly, obviously, taking the access off out of the equation, if you like, to the main site has taken away that issue in terms of vehicles passing very closely through what seems to be a very private road, and amenity of users of the bridle way as well. So the public right of way is now adequately protected. Highway safety, some further information was provided which showed traffic generation from this, and it's quite minimal. So I think in a peak hour, the sort of estimated vehicle movements were between 8 and 13 an hour. But I think more critically, the vehicle movements aren't past residential, aren't past the Cllr Drive residential properties. And the other Stoke Common, obviously there's a wider highway network, but the numbers are low, and there is no high objection from the county on that basis. Drainage, again, has the potential impacts of drainage have been significantly reduced by taking the construction of a new car park out of the scheme. So in turn, that took out the requirement for drainage works, and also highway improvements to the access drive. So overall, it's the impacts have been reduced. But nevertheless, they still need conditions to control them, and I think particularly, as I've mentioned, for the long-term management and maintenance of the SANG and the car park, and that will include things like signage on the road to inform people that they can't actually get any further. There'll be a gate stopping them. They'll probably only do it once, but nevertheless, and also bins, disabled parking. Those details need to go in a management plan, maintenance plan, so that it's long term. SANG has to be delivered for the long term as mitigation. It has to be delivered for the lifetime of the housing that it's mitigating for. So it is a long term thing. Biodiversity net gain, I mean, as I said, it's not legally required, but we'd still be looking for the legal requirement of 30 years management, maintenance. So we have conditions recommended that do that seek final details for that, and if members have got views on what that needs to include, then this is a good time to say, because that will be part of what will be considered when discharging the condition. And finally, I'll just mention that we're expecting, obviously with the cemetery car park, there is an existing path that runs up to Stoke Park Woods. We're expecting that some of the SANG users will want to walk that way. Forestry England have probably rightly said, well, that will, that may cause wear and tear on our existing paths, and there's a little bit of upgrade needed for the preferred route, which largely is quite good, but there's, again, it's over time. So so the recommendation is that there is a financial payment, which is required, which is supported by our policy, to pay over to the Forest England for those upgrades, and that's under negotiation at the moment. I've put the recommendation as per the report up because as already discussed, this decision on the application is to be made by the Joint Area Committee because the mitigation is beyond the local area. So that's the reasoning. So in accordance with the Constitution, the process, then your committee, you're being asked to support the recommendation to the Joint Area Committee, which is to grant permission subject to the obligation and conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. And what is the interest you are declaring? Thank you very much, Councillor Tidridge. Any questions? Councillor Marsh?
I'm going to start with confused.com because we went to a full council meeting where we asked about this piece of land. We were told it was up to the LAC. We came back to LSC, we said we wanted to turn it into a nature reserve, and then we were told no, we couldn't make the decision, it had to go back to full council. So it went back to full council, it's been bounced to us, but the decision's not being made by us, so we're not actually making a decision tonight on anything at all, because the Jack's going to be making that decision. So all that we're being asked for, so we're actually not taking a vote on anything substantive tonight, just saying, okay, we'll support them. And am I right in thinking that basically we're saying we're going to support them and making it into a protected nature area, which is what we said 2-3 years ago? So is that right? So we're not actually making a decision on anything other than, yeah, we support the Jack in whatever they decide, but we won't know until next week what they decide. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exact. I think you've said it very eloquently. It doesn't really matter. I think, you know, it could be, we could say we love it, we could say we hate it. It will make absolutely zero difference because all we're being treated as is a consultee. We have got no power in this whatsoever. So it's not really about the wishes of this committee at all. It's also, I don't even know if they'll pay a single solitary iota of thought to anything else we might say, because actually as a consultee I've got other things that I think we should be recommending to them, and I don't think it's just about whether the planning is adopted, you know. So I think we have to treat it like a consultation and we need to form a big full response. I don't think it's just about do we agree with this or not, personally, but I do have some questions of our officers, so I think we may. No, we had nobody. No, nobody was speaking, but they may be saving their thoughts to take to the Joint Area Committee. Because I thought the whole reason that Eastleigh had this set up was so that local areas took decisions about local decisions that affected local people by the local people they elected to represent them. Councillor Tidridge.
I'm going to ask a question, sorry Dawn, and I do feel that you're kind of caught up in this very much so. But just want to clarify, the Joint Area Committee is only taking a decision on the planning permission. The Joint Area Committee will not be managing this as an asset. So would it be possible to let this committee know who is expected, what committee is expected to be managing this asset, if you know?
I'll come back on that. As you're aware, Dawn is here as a planning officer, and this is not a planning matter that's being discussed. So the Joint Area Committee will only be determining the planning application. The asset, the wider asset, Stoke Park Farm, is a corporate asset at this time. No decision has been made as to who will be responsible for the future of the site long term. It is possible that the asset could be devolved to the local area committee at a later date. It's possible it could be devolved to the parish council in part at a later date. Those decisions haven't been made. Those decisions will be taken as the long-term use of the site is considered. So the council is still relatively early in the process on working out what the long-term proposals for the site are. We know what this committee's aspirations are, which is obviously around the local nature reserve. So there will be the opportunity for those conversations around who's responsible for the site at a later date to happen. At this point, we are only looking at the SANG application.
So in the 2 years, I think which have elapsed since the purchase of this land, and presumably a plan was put together in order to justify buying the land, this council still does not have any idea what it wants to do with it. Am I correct in stating that?
There are high-level proposals. We have the SANG that's been brought forward. We have the next application that will be considered. The detailed proposals haven't been developed, and there is work that has been done to understand the ecological value of the land and those sorts of issues. So decisions that will be made when all of the relevant information is available to make a properly informed decision on what the long-term uses will be.
Thank you, but in 2 years we still don't have a plan other than a high-level aspiration. Thank you.
Just,
Councillor Caws, do you have questions?
Can I just ask who will make that decision?
So it's a corporate site at the moment. There will be a corporate project team who work up the proposals, and then any planning applications that come forward, if they meet the criteria of the Joint Area Committee, will be determined by the Joint Area Committee. If there are applications that are not qualified to go to the Joint Area Committee, they will come to this committee for determining. And then because it's a corporate asset, there will be decisions that are made by the council through the cabinet around matters that aren't planning applications, if that makes sense.
But I'm just a bit confused, because if the whole site is related to the mitigation of the new forest strategy, then, and that is because, and the Jack is deciding on that, then why wouldn't everything go there? Or why are some things coming to the LAC and some things coming to the Jack? I'm not quite sure.
So the SANG is related to mitigation for the new forest. That's why it's going to the Joint Area Committee. Okay. If there were decisions made with regards to nitrates mitigation that required planning permission, that would potentially go to the Joint Area Committee because it has wider borough-wide significance. It's possible, for example, the buildings may not be required to go to the Joint Area Committee, depending on what the proposed use would be, because that may not have a borough-wide significance. So we would be looking at each individual planning application as they came forward and whether it was of borough-wide significance or not.
Councillor Caws.
Can I just ask one more question? I've been trying to get my head around this and I just can't, so I just want to ask the experts about the mitigation strategy. I understand, can you just tell me if I'm right or wrong on this? So what I understand is that we're making lots of developments here, and before we can make any more developments in this borough, we have to do something to mitigate the visits from potential new people coming to this area to the new forest. So that would be the SANG, but then I'm a little bit confused about, because Claire, you were talking about a pot of funds that go towards this. So where's the money coming? Who's giving money to who? Is that an exchange?
So yeah, so the council has an interim mitigation strategy in response to Natural England zoning, because that's fairly recent, and you know, fairly debatable, I would say, in terms of how it's evidenced. But in any event, the council's responded to that, because without doing so, then you know, development or any development, one house or above, in that zone would... It's not that it couldn't proceed. The council could decide to... we do the assessment, but it's at risk of being challenged, particularly by Natural England. So council's decided to address that issue by having a strategy that provides mitigation. So the strategy has a combined approach on the advice of Natural England. So Natural England prefer to stop trips going to the New Forest in the first place, so prevent. So that's their preference. So and SANG is what that's what SANG does.
Yeah,
People decide, shall I go to the New Forest or shall I go to somewhere else to walk my dog, basically. Yeah. But also there is a recognition that perhaps a lot less frequently, but at the end of the day, residents from anywhere might just, actually, I just want to go to the New Forest. I'll maybe only do it 3 or 4 times a year, but that also needs mitigating. So hence the payment for a ranger that is employed within the New Forest to manage the visits. To answer your other bit of the question is yes. So any, and it's mostly housing. There's that potentially things like hotels and things like that. Any new development now has to pay towards that strategy. So that's a financial contribution from each new housing that is in that zone. So there are some bits of the borough that aren't caught, but the ones that are in have to pay a contribution, which is what you saw when you had the resolution for the dwelling, before we can grant permission, and that money goes into a pot of money that is then spent on delivering SANG, and a very small part of it goes directly to the New Forest to provide a ranger, and there's a monitoring element to it.
So it's Eastleigh Borough Council paying the New Forest?
Well, it's the Eastleigh Borough Council collect the money and then pay it into the project. We do the same for the solar mitigation. We've done it for years. We collect the money. In that case, we pass on to Fareham Borough Council, who manage the project. So it's not. I think if your concern is it's council tax money, it's not. It's development.
That's not my concern. I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah.
So is this a recent thing? Were we not paying the New Forest before?
No. Only a very small part of the borough, which is in the Stoneham area of Eastleigh, was previously caught by their previous zoning, but then they've extended it so that it catches a lot more of the borough now.
Thank you.
Councillor Broomfield.
It seems to me this isn't being worked out on the back of a very big fag packet. But hypothetically, if the Joint Area Committee wanted to devolve responsibility for this to the Local Area Committee, does the option exist in the Constitution for the Local Area Committee to refuse to accept the responsibility?
I think I shall ask our legal advisor on that one.
I wouldn't know. I'd have to look that up. Sorry, that's not something I'd be able to answer directly. We'd have to come back to you on that.
I'd love to know if you can find out.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've got some questions. Oh, Councillor Marsh, have you got some questions?
Well, I guess I'm at risk of going into debate, but I have had an email from Mel, the clerk at Cllr Parish Council, which there were lots and lots of questions about this project. I don't feel this is the place to read those, but I would ask that, and Kitty, I think we forwarded it to you, so I would ask, could we forward these on to the JAC, because I think they're the ones who should be looking at these if they're making the ultimate decision on this, rather than us. And I guess my question is, are we going to waste an awful lot of time on this, talking about something that we actually don't have a say in? And I actually finally get it. So, Kitty, thank you. I wanted to say it was helpful understanding that the SANG is a corporately owned thing. Therefore, it's a corporate strategy, and therefore it goes to the JAC. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand the principle behind it, and I understand how the mitigation links to the corporate strategy. So I do understand that. But instead of us debating this at length, my question, I guess, is, instead of us debating this at length, are we better off putting together a response from us as a committee, which goes to the JAC?
I think there is a couple of things, because one, we have got our recommendation that's in front of us. I've still got some questions which I'm going to ask. I still don't get it, because if it's all about what we're doing strategically, corporately, that should be virtually everything we do. And I look forward, as one of the people that will be sitting on the JAC, to hearing all the One Horton Heath, because if there is nothing more strategic and more risky and more expensive and more debt-laden than any activity of this council, it is One Horton Heath. That can't be seen by a different group, because its impact is borough-wide. It will impact on everybody. So I've got that to look forward to, I presume. Councillor Couldrey, I do want to ask my questions, but if you've got a question, please feel free to ask.
I was just going to point out that it's already been delegated to another committee of the council.
Yeah, but that's not, the JAC now exists, and the JAC's job is to look at strategic matters, and the JAC has not met to say it can be delegated down to One Horton Heath.
It's not within the JAC's purview.
So, I've got some questions. The tree officer on page 39 asked whether the trees could be more mature. Is that going to be the case?
That wasn't the advice of our landscape officer, so they don't always recommend putting more mature trees in because they struggle to get established. So, but we haven't seen the final. We haven't seen the final plans yet. I would probably take the advice of the landscape officer over the tree officer in that case. But they will, hopefully they will be the right size for where they're going with the right provision for implementation.
Okay. My second question is that the arts officer states, and I'm going to quote there, "This is an opportunity to deliver priority public art in the first phase as identified by Biffo Lack in the public art vision for Bishopstoke, Ferrick and Horton Heath." Will this now be delivered? Obviously it won't be delivered by us because it's not our site. So is that art going to be paid for corporately? Yes?
All I can advise is that the intention is to provide public art, as I told you, at the, particularly where that viewpoint is. So I don't comment on who's funding it, but the proposal does include public art, so presumably that's part of the costings of the scheme. Okay.
I think I want to be reassured that that is included in the scheme, that they are paying for the artwork, and the view is absolutely adorable. You can see the sunlight glinting off of Winchester Prison on a nice day. You used to be able to see police headquarters as well, but that's gone now. But it is actually a gorgeous landscape. My fourth one is that the county archaeologists said that there had to be the inclusion of a heritage management plan. Will we be having that? Yes?
Yes, it's already included actually in the draft management plans, and it will be in the final plan. So, yeah.
Okay. Natural England on page 40 stated it does not support the council's interim new forest mitigation strategy as it currently stands. Is that still the case?
That's correct. Although they very much like the sang. So it's a comment that they make on every planning application, just to keep their line in the sand. But they very much like this. I've met them very recently. They very much like this sang as, if there is a strategy, and their issue is around the size of the total quantum of land that's being offered as sang. It's not that they don't support sang. They really do support sang. But they will always qualify their responses because it's around the size of the overall size.
So are they saying the size is Too small, too big, too what?
So not for this sang. This sang's fine, you know, and that we must focus on what this planning application is. So in terms of this, it's fine. It meets their guidance. It's the right, you know, it's a sufficient size. The circular walks are the right length. All those things. So that's why they're supportive of this. Their issue is around the interim strategy. So they have a blanket 8 hectares per 1,000 population that needs, they say, should be provided as new forest mitigation wherever you are. So you can be, you know, most of our sites, bear in mind they do a straight line across the Solent, which is not travel distance. Most of our sites are right at the edge of their zone, their new zone, but they say even if you live 1 kilometre within the new forest, Eastleigh has to provide the same mitigation. So they say you make the same number of trips, and we say no, you don't. That doesn't make sense. But that's where they sit at the moment, and that all, when you calculate it out, that means more. They say you need 8 hectares per 1,000 population to provide all that mitigation. We say you only need 2 because actually residents in the borough only make a quarter of the trips that the ones that live right next to it do. So and that's where we're at. That's where we've been for a little while now. And the local plan will sort this out. You know, and you know, with more evidence that backs up perhaps Eastleigh's position on that, because it is not, in my view, nonsensical. But that's just, it's blanket, it's cross country. It's not. They haven't, you know, they don't take into account where sites actually are. You know. So that's the issue. It's a wider issue around how much. So Natural England love this sang, but they'd also like to see, you know, 4 of them in the borough, as opposed to 1. So yeah.
Okay, and the other thing was on the Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust response. They said they wish to. We've heard about biodiversity net gain, but they also said that the central pond may not be connected to other habitats and of limited wildlife values. So how are you? Yeah, this was about the dogs, wasn't it? And
so yeah, unfortunately they've looked at the central. There isn't a pond in this SANG application, so they've looked at actually a pond that's not within this application site. It is something. If we get to that, you know, phase on Stoke Park Farm and there's still a pond there, then that will be. Yeah. There are. I mean, I think they've also there are for drainage. There are, you know, the site does have dips in it. They might have taken that as being a pond, okay, but it's not. So yeah, it's not a pond in our view. It's perhaps misinterpretation of the plans.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was just confused. Is this a question? Councillor Caws.
A couple of questions actually. So is it possible to show the map again of the green one of the actual SANG itself? The woodland buffer around the edge that you explained, Dawn, how many metres is that? How many, the width of that? Is that stated on the map?
It's scalable. Yeah, I think it's around 15 metres.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also the white part that is between the footpath and the start of the SANG, what is that? I couldn't see a key for that. What is?
So that's existing housing.
Oh no, not that. The other side, between the footpath. There, yeah.
It's land outside the application site.
Okay, so will that just be left?
Yeah, that's existing. This application, the red line runs down here.
So that's grassland at the moment then?
Yeah.
And that will stay there?
So, well, in terms of this application, you're just considering what's inside the red line.
All right, fine. Thank you. So you mentioned earlier that it was a good time to look at a management plan or talk about a management plan, because that was my other question. You know, it needs to be managed, doesn't it? Certainly for 30 years of the application. And is there a? Do you know who will manage that? Is that the Eastleigh Borough Council staff, or is that going to be outsourced, or is it going to?
In terms of what I would need to see as a planning authority, we need to see the plan. It probably will reference who will do what, but that's the important thing is what it does, you know, rather than who does it.
Okay, what it does.
So it wouldn't be something that I would take a view on. I mean, chances are it would be direct services, but you know, our countryside team. But that what's important is what it says, how it's managed, how it's maintained.
Okay. Who will devise that plan then?
So I would expect it to be done in-house, but with the advice of ecologists and so there's a project team, so it'll be led by the project manager. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. In the top right-hand corner, there's 8 metres of hedgerow that's going to be destroyed because the entrance is just a little bit to the left of that. You can just see the green piece. I can see it better on my map, but there's a little green bit of hedgerow sticking out. I'm just wondering if that's absolutely essential to have that entrance there, if it could not be moved like 8 metres to the right, or if that would ruin the whole plan.
Yeah, I did look at that on site. It
Me too.
does seem... I think the problem is if you move it, then the desire line will be to cut through there because that's the most direct sort of walk from... Because
it starts to slope up, doesn't it, after that?
So, and it, yeah, but as I said, there's you know, I can't remember what I said, 58%, no, I'm sorry, all my figures here.
Yeah, no, you said, yeah.
105%
no, I get that.
you know, so that it is being replaced by... You know,
it just seems a bit sad to get rid of hedgerow that's already existing.
But it did seem, you know, it did seem the obvious place to put it.
Okay. And just one more thing. In the Construction Environmental Management Plan, in section 6, it says that a regular independent environmental inspection will be undertaken on behalf of the EBC. Does that mean it's not by EBC? Do you know who that will be undertaken by?
At the moment, we employ somebody who's qualified to do that. So okay. I would, and very good. So I would hope it would be that person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dawn.
Any more questions? Councillor Tidridge.
Sorry, one for Kitty. Relating to this, this committee has, the last meeting passed a motion asking for a feasibility study to be done for a local nature reserve. Have you got any updates for that? Because that might be pertinent to our thinking.
I have, bear with me a second. So after the motion was passed by the committee, I discussed the question with the head of green spaces and the ecology and tree manager, both of whom, as you know, are very involved with the site. Staff are confident that the council already has much of the information that a feasibility study would provide, and that the proposals already developed for the site are entirely congruent with a local nature reserve further down the line. So a brief paper is being prepared and will be shared with this committee, and the ecology and tree manager would be happy to attend a committee meeting, committee team meeting to answer questions. In addition, I have also requested that the Strategic Land Board, which is the board within the council who have oversight of the strategic land parcels the council owns, consider the request for the council to commission a feasibility study. I've been advised that the Strategic Land Board will keep the motion in mind alongside the feedback from the previous consultation when looking at future options for the site. The current priority is to move forward with the SANG element, which does not conflict with any future plans for a nature reserve, should that be the direction of travel.
Thank you. That sounds quite positive.
Any other questions?
Sorry, one more.
Go for it.
Sorry. With the plan to use the cemetery car park, I know that a lot of residents in Cllr Drive were very worried about traffic going through. Is there anything being planned to make it challenging for a car to actually, not to go through Cllr Drive, obviously, residents need to get to their houses, but the point where Cllr Drive joins up with the farm track, are there any plans to put in any form of barrier or gate, or at least close the gate to prevent visitors from being tempted to drive through and park at the farm?
Yes, I'm told that the gate will be a gate will be reinstated there. So yeah, I say you might only do that once. But obviously with the pedestrian horse cycle bit to the edge, yeah.
About cycling, is there a plan for a bike park or a bike rack there? Because that would be quite good.
I think when we had the car park proposed on the site, that was part of it. Yeah, I had this discussion with Cllr Spark, so I was like, I think, yeah, we can certainly include it in the details. So, like, it'd be a rack. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not sure. You see, you go to a sang. Would you go to a sang?
Yeah, I do all the time, and
Yeah.
I mean, it would be good to have it out opposite the fishery place, because obviously the track in is quite bouncy, and really.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
But at that entrance, it would be quite good for people, residents of Bishopstoke, to cycle there and then walk around, if possible.
And can I just make the comment that those are the sort of things that I haven't finalised the report to Joint Area Committee, so I can change conditions that, update conditions for things like that, so don't feel that you have no opportunity to make a difference here. You do, but I need you to tell me tonight, because I have to get the report written tonight. So, it's that sort of detail that I'm interested in, because that is where you can, you have to, I have to agree with you, obviously, and put it in my recommendation, but, you've got the local knowledge, and yeah, so I would welcome any more comments like that. Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, we'll go into the debating element. Councillor Tidridge has been eager.
I think, adding to your list of things that would be nice to see, personally, I'd like to see a little bit of improvement, not to make it to road standard, obviously, on the bridleway connecting Crowd Hill with the Sang, just so that if you're cycling along it, it's not quite so engaging as it is at the moment. At the moment, you kind of really need definitely a gravel bike, possibly a mountain bike, to be able to cycle it with any comfort. But I think upgrading that just a little bit would be a more comfortable experience. The biggest thing I welcome, though, with the change to the plan is not building a new car park. I'm so happy about that. I think I counted up as 56 parking spaces we currently have on Cllr Drive for the current cemetery, which was put in as part of the Cllr Drive development, the cemetery extension, and the still unusable allotment. That's a lot of parking spaces. And so designating yet more tarmac, yet more unnecessary car parking spaces just seems crazy. It makes a lot more sense to use what there is. I'd also like to see, as part of this development, looking into some measures that might help to address some of the antisocial behaviour we've seen in that car park. In particular, I'd love to see ANPR in place in the car park, just as a way of discouraging antisocial behaviour. That would be really good to see. And obviously, because it will still be acting as a car park for the cemetery extension, a close relationship between whoever's managing this site, this Sang, whoever, and Bishopstoke Parish Council will be absolutely essential. I'm really pleased as well to see the plans to see a path going from the cemetery car park directly south into Stoke Park Woods and to that southern entrance into the Sang. I would like to point out that that particular pathway, as I think I mentioned in the briefing, is a quagmire. You need serious wellies for it, unless it's been particularly dry. And so I really hope that that Forestry England will be using some of the funding given to them to upgrade the drainage for that path in particular, so that it's less of a wader's experience and something that's easier. Because let's face it, the easier we make it to walk or cycle or whatever into the site, the more it's going to be a beneficial experience for visitors, and the less impact it will have on the residents of Sewell Drive. Because if people are walking, they won't be driving their cars down the middle bit, because it'll be a pleasant walk, part of a pleasant experience there. I'd also want to see work done with Bishopstoke Parish Council on the stretch of path that goes directly through the cemetery. That's a public right-of-way, and then maybe that it would be useful to know what Bishopstoke Parish Council's plans are for the cemetery extension, should it ever get handed over. Obviously, it's talking quite hypothetically here, but should it ever be handed over, it would be great to see what plans Bishopstoke Parish Council have for that, and making sure that what happens here is congruent. I know that the Parish Council, for example, was looking into a green burial project for part of it, which would be very congruent with this. But there's also an issue around, at the moment you've got the footpath going right through the cemetery. I don't think the level of use it has at the moment would be necessarily particularly disturbing to people using the cemetery, but that certainly is something that would need to be considered going forwards. Also, if there's some form of management of the car park, it might be a nice idea to be able to close it off if there's a funeral taking place. And getting into that kind of detail would be an interesting area for making sure that it has a really positive impact for the local community. I think the other thing, though, in terms of things which I think are really positive about this, I actually really welcome it. I approached it with a lot of scepticism to start off with, but I think what the plan currently looks like, I think will be a real benefit to Bishopstoke. And I think if it's done really, really sensitively, it can certainly fit well with the local nature reserve idea. And the good news is that there's been a lot of work being done by volunteers to scope out just how valuable Stoke Park Farm is from an ecological perspective. That I think is going to really help to educate that process for the SANG as much as for anything else. I'd also like to mention that Bishopstoke has a draft neighbourhood plan, which has been sat with going through the process. Part of the neighbourhood plan was identifying views and places that are special to local people. And the views from the south of this site were highlighted as being particularly of merit. I believe, actually, former Councillor Radine was particularly vocal about how much that was appreciated. And there are fabulous views from all over the site, which I know local people really appreciate. It's one of the reasons why there was so much opposition to the idea of turning it into another housing estate. So I think that's going to be a really good, positive asset. What else was I going to say? It would help with future planning permissions, however, for parts of this project, if there was an overarching strategy, if there was an overarching plan. The beauty of a local nature reserve plan is that it means that all these things can be shown as how they join up, how they interact with each other, how they impact on each other. And certainly when you read through a lot of the consultation results for both this application and the application for the new ponds, it's the interaction between things which is causing many of the stakeholders concern. And I think if there's an overall overarching plan moving towards the nature reserve, it can show how the SANG is complementary to it. It can show how the new ponds will work with it. It can show how the water flow works and how the hedgerows join up. And I just think it would be a very positive approach. But I've talked way too much, so I'll hand over to somebody else.
Councillor Broomfield.
All right, it's just actually a point. I do apologise if I'm wrong here, but I started my first meeting today about 12 hours ago. My head is on the swim. But should we not have a proposer before we start the debate? So can I suggest that we just accept what Gina said and not ask her to repeat it all? And I'm happy to propose that.
Councillor Broomfield is proposing. Who's second? Councillor Marsh. Thank you very much. Doesn't mean you have to support it. Right. Anybody else who'd like to speak in debate? Councillor Couldrey.
I just want to say how delighted I am that this is actually now going forward. I agree that the biggest improvement is the car parking. Everybody was absolutely accorded with that. And I know that there are turf wars going on between this and the Joint Area Committee, etc., which I'm not totally involved in, but I do think we just say this, let's go for it.
Any other debates? Councillor Marsh.
Just very briefly, I like it. I'm really pleased it's happening and it's going to be going ahead. I agree the car park is delightful that that's changed, and I really hope that Dorna's detailed plans get drawn up, that this committee and the people who know things are really truly consulted and their opinions valued in the process. I think that's crucial because it's not being written on the back of a fag packet. It is detailed planning that's going into this, but I think the right people need to be consulted. So I hope that will be taken into account.
Any other debate? I will say my bit otherwise. Yeah, thank goodness the car park has gone. It was absolutely incongruent with what was trying to be achieved for the entire site. I'd not only like to see bike racks at the site entrance at Bishopstoke, but at the site towards Fair Oak, because I think we need to be ensuring that residents of Fair Oak can access this site as well. I do have concerns about the displacement of existing native wildlife, which uses, so it's got to be good, and it's when that development is occurring, it has got to be sympathetic so we don't harm our existing wildlife. It's no good having biodiversity net gain or uplift if you killed off or disrupted the habitats of all the existing creatures. You know, everybody likes to say biodiversity net gain, but actually that takes a long time, and I want somebody to go back in 10 years and tell me how it's, what we actually have got and how much better it is. So I think we should be asking for that as well. So, yeah, it's much better than it was. I'd like to see no wire around the outside of it. It should all be hedging. It makes absolute sense for it to be all planted, all natural, because we're in the middle of a climate and environmental emergency. When you start putting in lots of unnecessary metal and gating and fencing, it's just not appropriate. I also thought that we ought to be saying to the Joint Area Committee that of course, as this is a county-wide, borough-wide asset, that all local area committees and their CIP lists, which is the community projects that they fund, will have to have this saying development on it, so that contributions can be secured for every development across the area to pay for this sang. So I think we should be including that as a recommendation, because we can, of course, say yes or no to the actual proposal of development, but I think we have to, we're being consulted, so I think we should be quite clear that if this is strategic and it is to help all the other areas, then all the other areas will have to be participating. Councillor Couldrey.
I'm not quite sure I understand how that reconciles with the determination of this committee not to contribute to the equivalent development at the Itchen Valley Country Park.
Because Itchen Valley Country Park wasn't part of the JAC and it wasn't considered part of the strategic land bank, we were told. That wasn't a decision for a JAC or the full council, it was a decision for West End. I believe I've remembered that correctly. I have remembered that correctly, thank you. So yes, it will be good to see corporate financing of this project. But I'm also looking forward to seeing the wider plan, because it will be brilliant if we get a COPS that runs between Upper Barn Copse and crowd hill cops. I want to see us getting national nature reserve level. We can do this. We want to do this. And I think we have to send that message that that is the desire of this committee. I also want to put on record my huge thanks to all the volunteers, and this includes in particular Cllr Caws and many other people who have been working many, many hours to demonstrate just how valuable, really incredibly valuable and irreplaceable this place is. So I do want that recorded. They're my few thoughts. I have got more about the Jack, but I'm not going to talk about that because I'm feeling quite happy that we've got a nice sang. So I shall leave my concerns about the Jack to raise with them directly. That aside, now anybody else want to speak on debate? No? Anybody in favour of proposing the sang with some of our additional comments, which will have been ably collected? All in favour? It's unanimous. Anybody against? No. Look at that. And now they're going to have to pay to have another committee sit there, pay another chair, pay officers' time, pay for a building to be staffed at night. Isn't that fabulous? I know we're now going to move on to the next item, which is item number 10. 9? 10. Oh, I've got it right. Item number 10, which is the planning application for Stoke Park Farm, Rowley Green Meadow, on Stoke Common Road, Eastleigh SO50 6DW. I've never heard of Rowley Green Meadow before. It's not something, it's just Stoke Park Farm. F24 96817, and I'm going to ask Dawn to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we're still at Stoke Park Farm, just a bit further north. So the application is again a mitigation scheme, this time for great crested newts. So it's in the form of 7 wildlife ponds, and then associated with that some new habitat creation, hedgerows and trees, and some fencing. So the application site is, as I've said, north of where we've just been looking at. So this is, if you want to get your bearings, this is the farm buildings, and then the application site is here. So the red, quite tightly drawn red lines, but around the ponds areas, and then you've got a blue line which shows the access track. So this is literally a track, and it gets slightly more gravelled, and then this is the tarmac routes that we've looked at with the residential in areas in here, and running right down to Stoke Common Road here. So so it's a great crested newt habitat, as I've said, so very specifically designed for that. The applicants are the Newt Partnership, so the experts in this. It's to provide for mitigation for primarily development sites, but it could be other reasons, for sites. It doesn't have to be in the borough, it could be beyond the borough, that are in existing newt habitat zones. And the mitigation is to provide new habitat. It's not necessarily to move the newts. So there's different ways of dealing with things, but that's what it does, and then the newts come to the pond. In terms of, again, where it is, it's adjacent a public right-of-way, so next to, so along here is our public rights-of-way running, again, they run throughout the Stoke Park Farm site. That one particularly links up to Church Road, but isn't on it, so critically doesn't affect it other than during construction. And as I pointed out, there's some existing access to the highway. Just to go into a bit more detail on the ponds, so as I've said, 7 in total there in the sort of light blue defined areas here. varying in size and depth according to what's needed, not particularly deep, between 0.8 and 1.2 metres deep. Their excavation creates the opportunity for bunds to be created on which hedges can be planted, so that's what's proposed. There's also, just shown on this plan, is Bow Lake ponders down here, streams down here, and this is its flood zone. So the development is outside of that flood zone area. And then we've just got, again, the same proposals, but shown on the overhead, on the aerial photograph. So you can see the site is currently a field. It's got trees and hedges on the boundaries and some within. Then no tree removal is proposed, so it works within that context. So as I've said, additional landscaping is proposed. So yeah, probably not a lot else that I need to point out. There's some of the new, again, biodiversity provision is natural scrub, so that's the yellow hatched areas that you can see. So because that is, it provides a lot of biodiversity gain, so that's why it's included. It actually will make the site a bit more interesting in this area. It's a former agricultural field. There's, this will make it slightly more interesting as you walk past it along the right of way to see that habitat being developed. So the key considerations, again, principle, local plan supports biodiversity and mitigation, so acceptable in principle and detail. So all our consultees are happy with the detail. It's not extensive work. So, for example, there's no new drainage going in, so that's good. So it's obviously very bespoke for great crested newts. In terms of other impacts, and we do this on, all sites that are close to River Itchen and major sites. We do an appropriate assessment, so that's under the habitat regulations. We do a very specific assessment that considers any potential impacts on the internationally designated site. So in this case, it's the River Itchen SAC and the site of conservation and special protection area, which is River Itchen, and we have to very much look at what could happen in terms of impacts. So we look at things like construction period, drainage, obviously for housing, things like that. We look at a lot more things, but those are particularly what we look at. Natural England didn't actually ask us to do, they didn't require one, but we thought one was needed, so we did one and sent it to Natural England, and they didn't comment because they didn't think that the potential impacts were sufficient enough to even have to do that assessment. But we took a more precautionary approach. We did that assessment with the view that, that very unlikely to have any harmful impacts on the river, as long as there was a construction management plan. So that's the sort of more risky, I suppose, part of the project is during construction. So again, we've got that final one in place, which makes sure that ecology and the water, particularly the water environment, so there's no pollution, can get into the water environment and the flows to the River Itchen during construction, and that there isn't any issue post-construction. As I've said, the public right-of-way does run next to it, but it is, we put notes to applicant on, recommended them so that they're, everybody's aware that you can't obstruct it and you need to protect it. And again, this is a long-term project which needs long-term management and maintenance. So we have got the plan, this bespoke plan for this scheme. So the recommendation is again subject to conditions to comply with that. So again, same as the previous application in terms of process. The advice is to support the recommendation to the Joint Area Committee to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do know we have someone from the Newt Conservation Partnership. Anne-Marie, would you like to come and talk to us? We obviously received representation when this was in proposal stage, and members were very keen, so we're really pleased to have seen this application come forward. So thank you. You have 3 minutes, and the light will go orange when you've 1 minute left, all right?
Okay, thank you. Hello, I'm here representing the Newt Conservation Partnership this evening. So we're an organisation with the sole purpose of creating, restoring and then monitoring habitat for great crested newts as part of the district licence for great crested newts. So working very closely with the Eastleigh Borough Council ecologists, I've been responsible for pulling together a plan for the area of Stoke Park Farm, which really it was between me and Paul started calling it Rowley Green Meadow, because we found on the historic maps that the bridleway used to be called Rowley Green Drove. So we started referring it to that between ourselves, and it seemed to stick. So anyway, I've been responsible for pulling together these plans, and it's for a high quality wildlife site which includes these ponds specifically for great crested newts. It provides this much needed habitat, but also for a whole range of other wildlife. Lots of other things use these high quality clean water ponds, and also obviously we're creating hedgerows and copses as well to tie it all into the wider landscape. So considering their small size, ponds have an amazing impact on the landscape around them. The number of rare plants and animals that rely on these really high quality ponds is quite phenomenal. And obviously it has a great impact for terrestrial species that are around the ponds as well, whether that's just from having water available or extra prey species. That it gives us quite a lot. Okay, we've already talked about the hedges. Oh, how's that? Thank you. So the opportunity to create the cluster of 5 ponds plus the 2 ponds closer to the Bow Lake here means that we can provide a really wide range of habitat conditions. So this increases the number of species that will be able to use the ponds in sort of more shallow water, deeper water, sunnier spots, shadier spots. And it also allows species to move between the different ponds according to the different conditions, whether that's the time of year, whether it's the maturity of the pond. So creating ponds is a really messy business. If you're minded to permit this application, I can't promise you that it will look beautiful straight away. In fact, it will look pretty horrific whilst it was being done. There are diggers, there is a lot of mud. However, I can promise you that we will take a huge amount of care with this landscape. I've spent a lot of time over at this site over the past few months monitoring the test pits and sort of doing soil tests, just sort of finding out about it. So we will take a lot of care over what we do. Within quite a short space of time, we'll have a really nice, excellent, really wildlife habitat here. It'll be something that will really be something to be proud of, I think. So as part of the legal agreement between Newt Conservation Partnership and Eastleigh Borough Council, Newt Conservation Partnership come back to monitor the site. So we come back and see how the ponds are developing, whether they're doing what they should be doing. And we'll keep doing that for the long term. So this is a 25-year agreement. We don't dig holes and walk away, so we'll still be invested in this site. So Newt Conservation Partnership have created over 360 ponds over the last 5 years across the 13 council areas that we work in. We have got a monitoring report for the ponds that have been created there. If anybody wants to look at that on the website, there's also some case studies on there, so hopefully you find that useful for what you might expect to have in a few years.
Thank you very much. Any questions for officers? Councillor Couldrey.
A couple of questions. The first is technical about well, not very technical. We do get very dry patches in some summers, and these don't seem to have any natural source of water. So you can expect these to dry out. Is that right? Yes, I'd love you to answer that, even though it's procedurally totally wrong.
Yeah, do I need to turn it on? Or? It's on, just like, yeah. So the cluster of 5 ponds, the substrate there, we went and dug some test pits in there, and it's really good blue clay, which means that it will hold water. So where it lies in a bit of a basin, we had a topographical survey as well, so that's quite a low basin in that point. So the water will run down into those points and it will collect there. I don't know if you've ever seen this site in the winter, but actually quite a lot of water comes down across the field.
In the winter you can't get through it,
yeah.
or you can.
Yes, so those ponds, because of the substrate, they can be expected to hold water year round. The other 2 ponds, the substrate's slightly different. They might not retain all of their water all of the year, but that's okay, because we have the whole selection of ponds, and we've got different conditions in each one, so that there are always going to be ponds that hold water. We definitely expect them to hold water.
So there'll be water all year round, even in the droughts that we can get, not this year.
We'd expect so, and actually for great crested newts, if they do dry out in occasional years, that's actually quite a good thing, because it reduces the predator load. So all of the invertebrates that would eat the young newts, the efts, it actually reduces that load down. So obviously it's not great for the invertebrates because they have a population crash, but then the newt numbers build up. So in the long term, occasional drying out is actually not the end of the world. It's actually quite beneficial.
Right, thank you. That's very useful. And can I ask a second question?
You may.
How are we going to keep dogs out? Because they're not going to...
Yes, please. And actually...
Can I bring... Thank you.
Actually, that's really... I was going to ask about dogs because of their flea coat treatment, which is really, really bad for our wildlife and water.
Yes. So we do want to keep dogs out of this area. So the proposal is to have a fence along that kind of like sort of that sort of north to south line along the field boundary. We're proposing to put a stock fence in there, which would have kind of like the mesh. We're going to have to leave a couple of points in there because we want badgers and everything to be able to get through. And we are so we're proposing to fence that side. We are going to plant a hedgerow alongside it as well. So in the long term, we would like to have a really nice thick hedge, you know. Maybe if it was laid, that would be lovely. Create a really nice thick boundary, and once this fence comes to the end of its life, we may not have to replace it. There could just be a gate in the gap, but initially there will be a fence. It really depends on the materials used. So we'll use the Hampshire countryside standards, and they generally look. It really does seem to vary, but sort of between 10 and 20 years. Because it can be quite a wet site, it might be slightly shorter, but it does dry out over the summer. So it will be a bit of a suck it and see thing, but that is included in the management plan as well to kind of see how it goes. Talking about the dogs as well, actually, Eastleigh have agreed to put an interpretation board up as well to explain what the field's for and why we would like dogs not to go in the ponds.
I'm hopeful that the dogs will remain at the Sang and not need to venture up to the newts. I did want to ask, because Bow Lake, you're not concerned about that watercourse reaching your ponds at all, are you?
No, we're not. So looking at the way the flood zones are modelled at the moment and the way that they're kind of like proposed to change over the next few years, essentially. So we actually really don't want the river water in the ponds.
Yeah. For 2 reasons. One, river water, but secondly, because it's rated poor for forever chemicals. The Environment Agency has rated it poor on all the different classifications. So I just wanted to be reassured you're not going to kill your newts accidentally. Yeah,
and it's been interesting actually monitoring the water in the test pits, because the 2 lower ponds were the ones we kept the test pits open in. And as when the water level drops in there, you get a little bit of a concentration of phosphates, not enough to worry us making the ponds, but no nitrates at all, whereas the Bow Lake, it's the other way around, there's very high nitrates. So if water was coming in, and we had some really high floods this year, it's not getting in there, and the way we're planning it, we're not expecting them to. We really don't want it to.
That's really helpful. Thank you for answering our questions. Any questions for the planners, members? Sorry, planners, this is not to try and... Councillor Caws.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of controversy about the track, which track is being used, because it seems to be this, the track on your map is the farm track, and it's not the public right of way, which seems to be the bridle way. The green line is the public right of way. Am I right?
Right, so there is the defined public right of way is to the west.
And it's invisible at the moment.
Yeah, but the public don't use it. They use the track.
Well, there is no...
So,
yeah.
you know, it's a bit academic, really, in terms of this, but I suppose ultimately...
No, but I mean, with relation to closing when the construction is happening, I assume that will be closed, so the farm track won't be...
It may not need to be closed. It needs to be managed during that time.
So you're not planning to reinstate the bridleway?
No.
Then? Okay.
No, there's no, and it's definitely not a prerequisite of granting planning permission for these ponds. It's something that the county, Hampshire Countryside have pointed out to us, and we're aware of it anyway, that ideally you'd divert the definitive path onto the track, and that could happen in time, but it's not necessary for this planning application.
Okay. I mean, it is already in existence at the top part a little bit. It does go into two, so that might be helpful. Okay, thank you.
Any debate? Oh, I'll get a proposer in a second. Do you want to propose, Misha? And Jim, would you like a second? Yes, please. I'm going to start the debate because I love mutes. I think this is brilliant. But, you know, you can hold me back and convince me otherwise, but I think this is excellent, and I'm really pleased we're doing some habitat uplift and some creation for wildlife is what we've been asking for, and this will be so good to form part of that broader nature reserve strategy. I think, you know, it's so important. We were excited when your colleagues came before, Anne-Marie. We were, and we are, well, I am still excited, and yeah, I like the Jack to try and stop us, to be frank. I would love to see them vote this down, because I'll be there and I will tell them what for. Yeah, I'll be supporting this. Anybody else? Councillor Tidridge.
Yeah, I just really wanted to link into what Karen was saying. I think there are issues which will have no impact. I mean, absolutely support the application. It's a fabulous initiative. We should absolutely do it. The thing that makes me a little bit nervous with Stoke Park Farm as a whole is that due to the complete vacuum of information, the complete vacuum of action, people are just going everywhere. I honestly think that needs thinking about by, if this is indeed a corporate asset, then Eastleigh Borough Council corporately needs to think about where does it want people, where does it not want people, where does it want dogs, where does it not want dogs. Look at the state of some of the bridleways, because some of them are basically the users of the bridleways are taking things into their own hands by developing their own routes, which are considerably easier to traverse than the official bridleways, in particular the one going from the farm towards this area. You've got people using the farm tracks, which are not rights of way, but they're being used as such. There's nothing to stop people or discourage people from doing that. So we're going to end up with basically one huge sang, unless the council decides corporately what it wants to do in terms of where does it want people, where does it not want people. And I think that there's lots been highlighted from this project in terms of, yeah, we don't want dogs jumping in the ponds because the dog-newt interface, I'm sure, won't be particularly positive. And not least, I'm sure dog owners don't particularly want their pooches to be covered in mud. So I'm sure that it's in everybody's best interest to make sure the dogs are kept out of the ponds. But it's introducing something into an area which is largely being treated as a free-for-all at the moment. So, and it's just how that's managed is going to be good communication, good signage, lots of positive messaging. a bit on the Eastleigh Borough Council website, lots of communication will help. There'll still be people that completely ignore it, but hey, at least you've gone some way to actually saying where you would like people as opposed to just allowing it to be a free-for-all.
I'm hopeful the same will also help this situation, because
Yes.
it'll become much more
More of a
apparent.
focus, yeah, more of a focus.
That's what I'm hoping for. Any other debate, Councillor Marsh?
Why wouldn't you want this? But particularly in light of the success at 1 Horton Heath, which I'm assuming you were involved in. Oh, no, you weren't. But they raving about their 6 great-crested new ponds there and how successful they've been. So we have a proven track record of great-crested new pots. It's really exciting to have you on board with this project and absolutely has my support.
Councillor Caws?
I totally love it, and I just want to say thank you to Anna Marie and also to Stephen Bruce, who've stayed through this whole meeting and just have been, you know, supporting Stoke Park Farm from the start. And it's just, you know, it's so good to see that, you know, these are 2 people who really care about it, but there's so many residents that really care about this, and, you know, I totally echo everything that Jen said about just getting a wider plan, and because, you know, people do care about the whole area. I constantly have people asking me, so what's happening over there? What's happening over there? And people are worried about what's happening. People are still worried there's going to be houses built upon it. So, you know, I do think it's so important to have some information to the residents of Bishopstoke and to the public about what is happening, because, you know, evidently, you know, these people that sat through this whole meeting tonight and are doing so much for the Stoke Park Farm area itself, and, you know, Anna Marie, who's sat here the whole night and is delivering something brilliant, and so many people are, and it's just, you know, it needs to be respected, it needs to be addressed. So yeah, but this is great, thank you, well done, excellent job, yeah, love it.
Any other debate? Shall we move to the vote? All in favour? Marvellous. We haven't finished, members. If anybody would like to leave now, we don't blame you. We fully understand, but...
Don't want to stay for the finances.
Thank you for all your participation and your forbearance. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, members, thank you.
I don't think you need it for the next 2.
We haven't got any projection. We don't need projection, but we do need the audio. So item 6 on the agenda, which is our financial report. So I'm going to ask Kitty to present.
Thank you, Chair. I won't read through the full recommendation, but there is a recommendation before members tonight to note the expenditure of developers' contributions on bin infrastructure, to note the allocation of developers' contributions towards the Lapstone playing field, which was a decision taken by Cabinet in December. There is a draw on the revenue account for neighbourhood watch signs, and then there are 2 requests for developers' contributions towards Upper Barn Copse, which has come from Ferrick Parish Council, and contributions towards drainage works in Ascot Road and Templecombe Road. Just to hopefully help you move this forward more quickly, with regards to the developers' contributions for drainage works, normally we wouldn't be recommending developers' contributions be used for that purpose. On this occasion, the definition of use for the contributions are both for drainage works, that's defined in the section 106, or for maintenance of public open space. So you can legitimately use the contributions for that purpose in this case, which is unusual. If members aren't comfortable doing so, then we can change the recommendation to draw on the committee's reserves instead. So over to members. Thank you.
Any questions, members? Okay, can I have a proposer, everybody? Councillor Tidridge and seconded by Councillor Broomfield, because that's the order I saw the hands go up in. Any debate? And I do have something to say, particularly about the contribution towards the drainage works, so I'm going to say it. I think if we are responsible for drainage works, that needs to be in our base budget just like there should be a base budget for trees. If we have things we are responsible for, we have to have budgets for them. Developer contributions are meant to be spent as a result of us taking on the pain of development, not for resolving things that are our responsibility already, like this. This isn't what those contributions are for. I'd much rather see £9,590 go towards open space than clearing out a drain. Now, I'm not saying it's not important for that work to go ahead, but we definitely need finance or somewhere in corporate Eastleigh to relook at the budgets and understand what it is we're responsible for and allow us to budget for it. Because if we had no developer contributions, what would happen? Would we just leave it? So I frankly, I'm not going to say I'm not going to support this one, but I think it sets a nasty precedent, because I know several drainage areas which are really bad in Bishopstoke. So will we have applications for that? And if this is Eastleigh's responsibility, it's their drain, why is it not built into a base budget? Why is it developer contributions? Because I don't think that's what developer contributions were set up for. But members might feel differently. Councillor Broomfield.
I just think it has to be done. We have the money. It's, as a local area committee, we're quite well off, and we're throwing around fairly large sums of money here. And I really think, in this particular instance, I don't have a problem with supporting it. It needs to be done. Let's do it.
Councillor Couldrey.
I think that you've got a very good point about budgets and controls and what is delegated to local area committees. And this is ad hoc. We've got to do it. I'm entirely in favour of doing it. I've been pushing for 2 years to get those 2 drains dealt with. And of course we all know about the rest of these things. So it's got to be done. But your point is a good one. And I think that we should put it down as an agenda item for discussion, quite how we deal with it. I think we need, in a team meeting, we need Kitty's improve, it's how you deal with the bureaucracy. I just don't understand and never do. But finding the right money is the key to getting everything done. And we really have to find a way of doing it. Okay.
Thank you. Any more debate? Okay.
I completely agree with councillors. The budgets do need to reflect the draw on services in the local area. As you're aware, I'm doing a financial review of the local area budgets. This is one thing that I am picking up as part of that review. So I'm already on it.
Councillor Caws, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with you, Lou. I think this is something that the council should be paying for, not developer contributions and not our local area committee.
Yeah, unfortunately. I think I don't want this to set a precedent, is what I want to say, really. I do not expect us to keep having to pay for drainage works. I hope that I'm making that quite clear. Right, so with that aside, and our lovely local area action plan review, which I hope you've all read because I thought it was brilliant. We've done far more than I had thought we had. So, all those in favour of accepting the recommendations? Carried, thank you. But I will most certainly be bringing up our budget often. Finally, we're going on to item 7. I'm going to pass over to Kitty to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations are as set out in the report. Thank you.
Any questions? Any debate? Oh, no, sorry. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marsh. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Caws. Any debate? Can I just double... Councillor Marsh. I was going to say, can we just double check that Councillor Tidridge are happy? Excellent. All those in favour of Councillor... Yeah, perfect. Anybody against? No. Everybody can go home. Well done, staff, officers. Well done. Oh.
Oh, Steve.
Oh, thank you. Right. And finally, is that item 13? You see, it's unlucky. No.
Yes, it's on the agenda front sheet. It's on the front sheet.
It's a, yeah, that's... It's just, you note them, really.
So, thank you, noted.
Yeah. Any debate? Well, Brad, you're close. Thank you, members. Thank you, thank you, IT. Thank you, officers. Thank you, everybody. Go home. I'm asleep already. Night.